American Comics. My Warhammer Simulator Chapter 976-1000. You issued the order for the vanguard to attack. Rumble. In an instant, a terrifying barrage of cannon fire, dense as a torrential downpour, erupted from the central position of the Iron Hands Legion and the right flank of the Salamanders Legion, like shooting stars in broad daylight. Countless whirlwind missiles, leaving conspicuous trails, combined with wave after wave of orbital bombardments descending from beyond the atmosphere, repeatedly ravaged the large-scale defensive fortifications of the traitor legions. At this moment, even standing far behind the central position, you could clearly feel the terrifying heat waves generated by the continuous explosions of countless cannon fire and missiles, and the hard land plate beneath your magnetic boots seemed to emit a piercing hum and tremble. However, these large-scale defensive fortifications, meticulously planned by War Master Horus and personally overseen by Fulgrim, were only made more scorched and shiny by the widespread attack of numerous long-range artillery, with only a small portion of the unreinforced edges of the positions completely turning into raging ruins. Under your command, the first wave of probing attacks by the vanguard forces clashed for the first time with the Death Guard and Fulgrim's Emperor's Children. On the smoke-filled black sand battlefield, agile Raven Guard, with nimble footwork, were the first to engage in extremely brutal close-quarters combat with the Emperor's Children. As countless pieces of power armor flew, the Salamanders, armed with flamethrowers and heavy firepower, also joined the fierce battle against the Death Guard. Immediately after, on the flank of the traitor forces, a unit of elite veterans from the Iron Hands charged into the depths of the enemy formation like fearless combat mechs, relentlessly slaughtering the Death Guard and Emperor's Children. At this moment, your cold gaze constantly fell upon the number of Astartes casualties displayed in your helmet's field of view. Judging solely by the casualty ratio between the two sides, your vanguard forces held a slight advantage. However, not long after, a large number of World Eaters, wielding chainsword axes, charged into the combat zone like corn demons, enduring the continuous artillery bombardment from above. In your field of vision, the vanguard's casualty ratio immediately began to skyrocket exponentially. You took a deep breath and immediately issued an attack order to the Raven Guard on the left flank. Under the personal leadership of Primarch Corax, tens of thousands of Raven Guard swiftly propelled their power armor, executing a flanking maneuver towards the increasingly chaotic center of the battlefield. The next second, Vulcan, located on the right flank, also received your order to attack, and hulking salamanders, carrying more heavy fire weapons, joined the increasingly intense battle. Boom, boom, boom. Corax, whose massive form resembled a steel giant raven, swiftly swept across the chaotic battlefield using his flight pack, and each time his raven claws, covering his massive hands, extended and retracted, tens, even hundreds, of Emperor's Children and World Eaters became souls claimed by his claws. Then Corax's massive body crashed to the ground. A multi-headed power whip several meters long, imbued with an unstoppable combat aura, swiftly wrapped around the hulking bodies of several Death Guard Terminators. Corax pulled with a casual tug, and several Death Guard Terminators, their hands stained with the lives of Raven Guard descendants, were instantly torn into countless pieces of flesh. Meanwhile, on the other side of the chaotic battlefield, Vulcan's massive body was slowly treading through raging infernos. Countless salamanders, armed with flamethrowers and heavy fire weapons, continuously swept past their Gene Father, unleashing unforgiving fiery punishment upon every traitor within their optical range. Rumble. Vulcan, whose physical strength was arguably the greatest among the Primarchs, swung the Dawnbreaker Warhammer tightly gripped in his palm. This terrifying Warhammer, seemingly imbued with an invisible fluctuation, could not be successfully withstood by any Astartes of the traitor legions. Every time the enraged Vulcan swung the Dawnbreaker Warhammer, dozens of traitors attempting to surround him were instantly shattered into flying bloody remains. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, countless raiders attack squads from the Sons of Horus, carrying jump packs, raided deep into the chaotic battlefield. More World Eaters, wielding chainsword axes, also charged into the main force of the Raven Guard, causing significantly heavy casualties. And amidst the elite squads of the Emperor's children, Fulgrim's magnificent figure vaguely appeared far behind the enemy's battle lines. At this moment, the Astartes casualty ratio in your field of view instantly surged. However, you had never extensively deployed Ferris's Iron Hands. Ferris himself, along with 9 remaining companies of elite veterans, were still waiting for the opportune moment to fight in the central position. And perhaps the conversation between you and Ferris had a significant effect. Even though he had already detected Fulgrim's presence in advance, he did not move his magnetic boots, merely gripping the ornate hilt of his fire blade tightly with his iron hand. This intense battlefield, in your opinion, was merely an appetizer. The real feast would only begin when the 4 subsequent legions arrived and initiated their landing operation. At that time, the pincer attack from both the rear and front positions would be the death trap Warmaster Horus had prepared for you Primarchs and hundreds of thousands of Astartes. Therefore, you had to reserve enough Astartes forces in advance to withstand the first wave of terrifying attacks. Even as the Astartes engaged in battle suffered increasingly heavy casualties, you did not send out any support teams. What you desired was not the victory of a mere battle, but a strategic victory in a large-scale campaign. You seemed to be gradually transforming into the strategic master Guilliman, learning to survey the entire battlefield's developing situation from a higher dimension. Rumble. It was at this moment that huge fragments of space vessels suddenly appeared above the sky, which had been firmly obscured by countless cannon fire and whirlwind missiles, continuously plummeting onto the chaotic battlefield. And judging by the numerous chaotic communications reaching your ears and the wails of the mortal crewmen, the fleets of the 4 traitor support legions had finally arrived around Istvan V. Your fleet, having learned the truth in advance, launched an incredibly fierce attack on the enemy's fleet at the first opportunity. You took a deep breath, gripping the glowing green blood scythe tightly in your palm. Next, a terrifying civil war, unprecedented in the brief history of the entire human empire, was about to truly begin. Your massive body slowly ascended into the air, countless dark shadows, recoalescing from within, spreading across the vibranium power armor's faintly glowing shell. You briefly calculated the attack time of the traitor legion's fleet. You immediately ordered the numerous librarians of the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard to raise their psychic shields and simultaneously funnel massive amounts of psychic power into you. Buzz buzz buzz. The next second, immense psychic power from countless librarian units continuously poured into your massive body. Strands of dark shadows, suddenly rising upwards, danced like fire across your armor's shell. You gritted your teeth, enduring the physical pain caused by the shadow power's rampant expansion. You did not enter the warp-liberated state of a raven-headed human. The reason you gathered such a large amount of psychic power at this moment was not to increase your individual combat strength, but to allow more Astartes to survive the subsequent attack. Rumble rumble. At this moment, the terrifying roar from the sky above made every Astartes involuntarily raise his head. A massive orbital bombardment, almost completely illuminating the dim sky of the entire Istvan V planet, descended with a crash upon your legion's heads. You abruptly raised a massive hand, entwined with a vast amount of dark shadows. With your movement, layers of shadow veils, as if alive, rapidly spread across the entire legion's position above. The next moment, countless brilliant energy beams from the orbital bombardment were successfully blocked by the layered shadow veils. Even though some areas where the shadow power was weaker were torn open by constantly exploding energy beams, creating terrifying gaps, you, with the immense psychic power of countless librarian units, gritted your teeth and filled them perfectly, continuing to endure the relentless orbital bombardment. Soon after, this massive orbital bombardment, which lasted for nearly an hour, was stubbornly resisted by you alone. It didn't even cause a large number of casualties to your legion's position or the number of Astartes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. However, at this moment, the dimly lit sky, which had just fallen silent, was once again completely occupied by dense landing pods. Tens of thousands of landing pods, engulfed in heavy fire, crashed down further behind your legion's position. Countless landing pod hatches, instantly blown outwards, revealed large numbers of Astartes from the Word-Bearers, Iron Warriors, Midnight Lord's Legion, and Alpha Legion to your field of vision. At the same time, the Emperor's children and sons of the Hydra, seemingly having received coordinated orders, also almost moved out en masse, and even the Death Guard and the heavily damaged World Eaters, relying on the great boost from Chaos power, launched a frenzied assault on the battle lines stubbornly maintained by Corax and Vulcan. You almost immediately saw Fulgrim, who was constantly wielding his piercing sword and reaping lives among countless Astartes troops, engaging in an incredibly fierce battle with the thick-skinned Vulcan. You no longer had time to worry about the lives of Vulcan and your other Primarch brothers, you could only trust your Primarch brothers' combat abilities. Your massive body, which had been suspended in midair, landed heavily, kicking up countless black sand particles. You took a deep breath, completely entering a battle state devoid of emotional fluctuations. You immediately mobilized the elite veterans of the Iron Hands, personally led by Ferris, to launch a fierce attack on the 4 traitor legions behind the position. Over 40,000 salamanders, intentionally left for you by Vulcan, also launched continuous charges and raids from the flank towards the traitor legions' positions. At the same time, tens of thousands of Raven Guard, who had been lurking deep in the underground trenches for a long time, emerged like elusive shadow ghosts behind the traitor legions' positions. These Raven Guard, doubly enhanced by you and Corax, seemed to possess some shadow power. At a glance, they appeared to have become a cursed legion, and they infiltrated and broke down the traitor legion's reserve forces with even swifter and more powerful attack methods. In an instant, countless Astartes, once battle brothers, engaged in a desperate and frenzied slaughter against each other. While observing the Astartes casualty ratio, you also saw large numbers of Astartes from the Salamander's Legion, using a barbaric combat charge, forcibly break open a corner of the Iron Warriors' massive battle formation. A group of quick-reacting Iron Hands elite veterans seized the opportunity to launch a surprise attack, but they were forcibly stopped by the Sons of the Hydra, who had also detected their movements, at a terrifying cost of hundreds of casualties per minute. Meanwhile, Ferris, constantly roaring, seemed to completely vent his anger and hatred for Fulgrim onto the Word-Bearers' legion before him. Under the fierce siege of countless Word-Bearers, Ferris, like a humanoid war god, repeatedly tore and crushed the Word-Bearers' heads with extending servo arms, while seemingly endless terrifying laser beams and miniature missiles continuously covered the Word-Bearers' legion forces, causing thousands of horrifying casualties in a short period. However, at this moment, you, who were repeatedly coordinating the attack directions of countless Astartes, suddenly detected the trace of another traitor Primarch, the Lord of the Word-Bearers, Lorgar Aurelian, from the chaotic battlefield. You subconsciously tightened your grip on the blood scythe in your palm. Your massive body instantly lifted off the ground, enveloped in countless dark shadows rising like fire, launching a frenzied charge towards Lorgar's direction. Lorgar, come out and die, your low roar echoed across the entire battlefield like a war horn. At this moment, Lorgar, firmly guarded by countless enchanted warriors of the Word-Bearers, abruptly turned his head, which was covered in mysterious runes. Damn Luo Shah, why is it you again? Lorgar, with an incredibly grim expression, abruptly swung his Primarch-grade power scepter named Light of Revelation. Numerous powerful blessings composed of chaos sorcery scattered across his sturdy body, and the armor shell, known as Armor of Truth, immediately displayed dense protective runes. At this moment, Lorgar, gripping his power scepter with both hands, launched an astonishingly powerful and frenzied charge towards your front at a terrifying speed that ordinary Astartes could hardly achieve. However, merely seconds later, Lorgar, who had just had a fierce collision with you, was sent flying hundreds of meters away to the ground by your single punch. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 978, The Gorgon's Head, Ferris Manus v. Open Black Lens Bracket Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone, close black lens bracket. At this moment, your gaze fixed on Lorgar, who was flying backward, and you were visibly stunned. Although your physical strength was formidable, it shouldn't have made a Primarch so disheveled, right? Were you too strong, or was Lorgar too weak? Buzz buzz buzz. In a flash, you suddenly swung the blood scythe forward, effortlessly slicing a dozen enchanted warriors, known as the Blessed Sons, into a shower of bloody fragments. Your massive body, enveloped in a flame-like dark shadow, continued to fly towards Lorgar, who had crashed heavily to the ground. Boom! Before you even got close, Lorgar, his face growing angrier, picked himself up from the ground. He violently swung the Illuminator power maul clutched in his hand, sending one by one powerful psychic lightning bolts rapidly towards you. However, you remained unfazed, merely conjuring a layer of shadow armor to cover your body, allowing the opponent's psychic power to continuously strike your massive form. Your giant vibranium fist once again struck Lorgar's sturdy body. The Lectitio Divinitatis armor, covered in mysterious protective runes, flickered slightly, and numerous fragmented armor plates scattered everywhere. This terrifying punch, infused with flying speed and the amplification of your rage, not only completely shattered the opponent's psychic shield and power armor but also sent him flying backward like a rag doll. At this moment, you subconsciously gazed at your vibranium fist, and a look of sudden realization gradually appeared on your bronze-colored face, hidden within the skull helmet. If there was a ranking among the 22 Primarch brothers, then, for the mastery of psychic power, if Magnus said he was first, no one would dare say second. As for physical strength, although the good-natured Vulcan would consider his Primarch brother's feelings and was unwilling to show off too much, he was clearly the strongest among the Primarchs, and even the ascended Angron could only rank second. But when it came to Lorgar, his psychic power couldn't compare to Magnus, and his physical strength was inferior to Vulcan or Angron. Even his lethality or destructive power was clearly no match for Sanguinius, not to mention his command and internal affairs management, which couldn't compare to Guilliman and Dorn. In your opinion, Lorgar seemed to excel only in his research on faith. However, from the moment he chose to betray the Emperor, even this slight advantage was personally abandoned by him. Therefore, if one had to choose a Primarch of shame from among the many Primarch brothers, that title would seem to belong to Lorgar. Thump thump thump. Your massive body landed heavily on the black sand, covered in a foul stench of blood and armor fragments, as countless word-bearers, armed with melee weapons, relentlessly swarmed towards you. But the power gap between a Gene Seed Primarch and an Astartes was too vast. It was not something that could be compensated by the sheer number of people before you. You merely swung the blood scythe back and forth, sweeping horizontally with force, and hundreds of word-bearers, unable to withstand even a single blow, could only become scattered bloody corpses. Lorgar, are you just going to watch your bloodline descendants die for you? You are truly too weak, worthy of being called the Primarch of shame. In my eyes, you can't even compare to Angron, who lacks self-awareness. Your gaze was fixed on Lorgar, who was retreating, as you roared in a low voice. You slowly drove your vibranium power armor forward, as countless terrifying gunfire from the word-bearers' assault forces repeatedly detonated on your massive body. You seemed completely unharmed, and with every step you took, dozens of word-bearers unfortunately became tragic souls beneath your blood scythe. Perhaps your slaughter of the word-bearers' legion was too bloody and cruel, or perhaps Lorgar could not tolerate your calling him the Primarch of shame. Luo Shah. The next moment, Lorgar, clutching the Illuminator power maul in both hands, let out a deafening roar while disregarding the obstruction of his close subordinates, and once again launched an astonishingly powerful charge towards you. Your eyes were utterly cold. You left no room for him to retreat. A large amount of dark shadow, like rising fire, rapidly flowed out from your massive body. Countless shadow power, instantly transforming into giant shadow ravens, firmly enveloped Lorgar's sturdy body, immediately unleashing a terrifying storm akin to flesh-slicing torture. Sizzle sizzle sizzle. After several tens of seconds, countless shadow ravens scattered with a roar, returning to your massive body. Lorgar, now presented before countless word-bearers and even you, seemed to have only a single breath left. His limbs had been largely severed, and even the Lectitio Divinitatis armor covering his sturdy body was shattered beyond repair, even vaguely revealing his rapidly writhing and healing internal organs. However, just as you intended to raise the blood scythe in your hand to deliver a fatal blow to Lorgar, who had not yet ascended to demonhood. Countless increasingly frenzied word-bearers and dozens of fully combat-ready enchanted warriors launched continuous charges at you. It was this brief few seconds of obstruction that allowed a sudden teleportation light, appearing on Lorgar's mangled body, to successfully extract him from the current battlefield. You were clearly somewhat angry about this, and your methods of slaughtering countless word-bearers and enchanted warriors became increasingly cruel and merciless. Not long after, you, with your massive body covered in countless bloodstains and shattered flesh, temporarily ended your continuous slaughter of the word-bearers' legion. A large amount of updated Astartes casualty data not only calmed you down but also temporarily returned you to your role as overall battlefield commander. The current battlefield situation was becoming increasingly chaotic and desperate. Every inch of Istvan V's surface was scattered with your and the traitor legion's hot blood and fragile lives. Even though your 4 gene seed Primarchs virtually crushed the combat power of ordinary Astartes. But when the number of enemies gradually increased to tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, the effectiveness of your individual combat power, which you prided yourselves on, became increasingly limited. You furiously drove your vibranium power armor, wielding the blood scythe in your hand, moving like a human tank, interspersing and slaughtering within the Iron Warriors Legion's massive battle formations. You successfully found Ferris, who was being besieged by countless Iron Warriors, as well as the Iron Hands, who had only 5 elite companies remaining. Thank you all for your support. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival to everyone, and may your families be reunited. Chapter 979 The Head of Gorgon, Ferris Manus Part 7. Even if your arrival successfully changed the bad news of Ferris being beheaded on the spot by Fulgrim, preventing him from becoming Headless Ferris. However, with your 3 legions facing 8 traitor legions, even if the Emperor himself were here, ultimate victory in this battle would not necessarily be achieved. Currently, of the 90,000 Salamanders Astartes, less than 50,000 remain. Of the 80,000 Raven Guard, less than 40,000 remain. Even the 10 elite veteran companies brought by Ferris only have 5 companies left, and almost all are wounded. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. You once again unleashed a shadow giant crowstorm towards the surrounding Iron Warriors battle formation, successfully covering Ferris and the Iron Hands elite companies as they broke through the encirclement. You and Ferris had a very brief exchange, agreeing that you could not continue to be consumed by the traitor legions here. Otherwise, the traitor legions could slaughter your legions to the last man, even if they relied on Astartes' numbers to trade lives. You and Ferris led the way, guiding the Iron Hands elite companies, and launched a combat charge towards Korax and Vulcan's battlefield. At the same time, Fulgrim, who was engaged in a fierce duel with Vulcan, was brutally impaled through the back by Korax's shadow claws, even lifting him entirely into the air. Ferris, who had the deepest relationship with Fulgrim, might have shown mercy to him. But Korax and Vulcan, having been specifically instructed by you, were already as hard as steel. They decided to eliminate this Primarch traitor, who would kill his own Primarch brothers, on the spot. Buzz, buzz, buzz. However, at this moment, before Korax's shadow claws and Vulcan's Dawnbreaker could heavily descend, Fulgrim, whose agile body was still in midair, blood gushing from his mouth and nose, suddenly underwent an extremely strange change in his eyes, which had been filled with a sense of relief. His beautiful face seemed to reveal a cold, mocking smile, and his impaler, which had been hanging down, rose again, suddenly slashing across Vulcan's throat like lightning. Vulcan, Korax, his eyes suddenly wide, let out a thunderous roar. A large amount of shadow power, which you had previously infused into him, seemed to have completely activated its hidden strength. Korax's massive body suddenly performed a shadow step, almost like teleportation. By the time he appeared behind Fulgrim, the shadow claws, imbued with tendrils of dark shadow, had already violently pierced towards the vital head of his opponent. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Just then, countless chaos psychic power appearing out of thin air completely enveloped Fulgrim's agile body, instantly putting him into a flickering teleportation state. Fulgrim, seeing the opponent about to escape the chaotic battlefield, roars from you and Korax echoed all around. From 1,000 meters away, you suddenly hurled the blood scythe, tightly gripped in your palm, like a throwing weapon. And Korax, in midair, had no choice but to accelerate the swing of his shadow claws, attempting to take Fulgrim's life. But after the opponent completely vanished before you, only a bloodied, muscular arm and half of a cleanly severed lower leg were successfully intercepted by you. Bang! Korax's massive body landed heavily on the black sand. He once again performed a shadow step, appearing directly in front of Vulcan, who was kneeling on one knee. In just a dozen seconds later, you and Ferris also sped your power armor to the vicinity of the two. Fortunately, although Vulcan suffered a fatal wound from the impaler. However, he successfully survived by relying on his physical regeneration abilities, which were far stronger than those of other Primarch brothers. Now, the Gene Seed Primarch of the Traitor Legions on Istvan V has temporarily fled the battlefield, but the furious offensive of the 8 Traitor Legions shows no sign of stopping. In fact, with the teleportation and withdrawal of important figures, orbital bombardment from above your heads once again descended upon the scorched earth. Due to the extremely heavy casualties of the countless Librarian brothers, you were no longer able to employ the previous super large-scale Shadow Veil defensive measures. If you could not quickly come up with a solution, the casualties of countless Astartes' sons would become even more terrifying. Amidst the raging war, you and the other 3 Primarch brothers briefly discussed the situation. You decided to immediately lead the remaining Astartes to forcefully break through the Traitor Legion's encirclement and wait for reinforcements from the Imperium on Istvan V in the form of guerrilla warfare. Whether it was the main force of the Iron Hands or the whereabouts unknown fleet of the Imperial Fists, as long as one of them arrived on Istvan V. This death trap battle, personally designed by Horus, would present a precious hope of survival from certain death. But before that, you could not confirm how many Astartes' sons would successfully survive. Boom, boom, boom. Under the call of you 4 Primarchs, countless scarred salamanders Astartes and Raven Guard Astartes successfully formed layer upon layer of charging spearhead formations. The remaining Iron Hands elite companies also became the rearguard, maneuvering to support the main force. The next moment, you and Ferris, Korax, and Vulcan desperately drove your power armor, launching the first offensive charge towards the dense encirclement of the Traitor Legions. You, as Gene Seed Primarchs, must use your combat power, far exceeding that of ordinary Astartes. To carve out a breach in the encirclement of countless Traitor Legions, only then can you open a true path to survival for the countless Astartes' sons behind you. Flesh is weak, this was the roar from the Iron Hands elite veterans. They seemed to have prepared to sacrifice their entire force to act as a rearguard and intercept pursuers for the main force. Bathed in fire, forged on the anvil, this was the roar of countless salamanders Astartes. As the most numerous, strongest in defense, and most enduring Astartes in the main force, they were destined to become tragic sacrifices in this breakout battle. Victory or death, a large number of Raven Guard Astartes seemed to gradually have tendrils of shadow power rising from their bodies. They would sacrifice their lives to kill every traitor within the Traitor Legions with all their might. And to break through the encirclement for their Gene Father Korax, and for you 3 Gene Seed Primarchs fighting alongside them. For the Emperor, Ferris, Korax, and Vulcan could not help but let out thunderous war cries, charging into the dense defensive array formed by the Iron Warriors, Midnight Lords, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children. And your blood scythe, tightly gripped in your palm, was swung forcefully, sweeping across the complex battle formations composed of successive waves of World Eaters, Alpha Legion, Sons of Horus, and Word Bearers. At the same time, your incredibly deep roar quickly reached the ears of every loyalist and heretical traitor. For all of humanity, thank you all for your support. The turbid air, thick with the scent of blood, seemed to be burning fiercely, and the broken ground, like black sand, appeared to be shaking violently. In an instant, a scorching laser beam, nearly as thick as a bucket, rapidly assailed you. Along its path, countless salamanders and Raven Guard, along with some traitors who were fighting fiercely, were all annihilated into light, drifting ashes. Before you, quick to react, could raise your hand to unleash your shadow armor, Ferris, with his sharp eyes and quick hands, abruptly propelled his power armor forward, using his two silver glowing iron hands to forcefully block the terrifying energy blast, which was powerful enough to severely wound any Primarch present. The next second, Korax, whose massive body was entwined with wisps of dark shadow, immediately unleashed Shadow Step, his shadow claws covering his hands, already having effortlessly sliced the immensely threatening volcano cannons and Alpha Legion traitors nearby into a large amount of wreckage, a mix of metal and flesh. Rumble. Vulcan, with skin as dark as ink and eyes wide in fury, wielded the Dawnbreaker in his palm like a miniature titan, sending countless traitor Astartes attempting to encircle him flying. The scorching flames continuously erupting from his forge hand were almost unstoppable. Even the World Eaters, with the blood god in their minds and no concept of fear, dared not easily impede Vulcan's advance. Dozens of meters away, the blood scythe gripped in your hand was almost blurred into indistinguishable green light wheels. Every traitor who unfortunately touched the edge of the green light wheel was instantly cut into neatly uniform, sliced remains, like Grok's meat put deep into a meat grinder. At this moment, you four immensely powerful Gene Seed Primarchs were struggling to advance within the massive encirclement formed by 8 traitor legions. Countless blood-soaked bloodline descendants were following your footsteps, launching charge after charge towards the outside of the encirclement. Even the elite Iron Hands Company, responsible for covering the retreat of the main force, had not yet been completely annihilated, and occasionally, you could still hear the angry war cries of Astartes veterans. After you led the main force to continue advancing for a period, the elite company of the Iron Hands seemed to have completely fallen silent, leaving only groups of traitor Astartes rapidly closing in from the rear. Every minute, every second, countless scarred loyalist Astartes, either due to severe injuries or exhaustion, finally collapsed onto the black sand. More traitor magnetic boots heavily trampled upon these loyalists' sturdy bodies, leaving not even a complete corpse. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, your beast instinct buzzed, and you suddenly turned your skull helmet. You instantly saw several word-bearers, clutching bundles of thermo-melt bombs, advancing towards the Primarch's position, under the cover of a group of Sons of the Hydra, on the chaotic, meat-grinder battlefield. You took a deep breath, and a vibranium hand suddenly rose and clenched tightly. Countless dark shadows, rising like flames, rapidly detached from your massive body, then directly formed into immensely large shadow hands, forcefully dragging several word-bearers into midair. Rumble. However, at this moment, one of the word-bearers seemed to realize that the situation was hopeless. Before being completely crushed into a bloody pulp by one of your massive shadow hands, he directly detonated the bundles of thermo-melt bombs in his arms. Blindingly hot explosion flames and deadly impact waves swept towards everything in the surroundings. Both loyalists and traitors alike stumbled to the ground, and Ferris, the Primarch closest to the explosion's center, also had to raise his iron arms to defend, his entire sturdy body being forcefully thrown backward by the continuous, scorching impact waves. Thump, thump, thump. Your massive body instinctively retreated several steps, allowing countless scorching flames to pass over your golden glowing vibranium power armor. From the casualty data inside your skull helmet, you saw that the number of loyalist Astartes was rapidly decreasing, only less than 30,000 salamanders remained, and only about 20,000 Raven Guard. The elite company of Iron Hands brought by Ferris had been completely wiped out. You must, at the fastest speed, tear open a breach for your legion within the encirclement. You once again took a deep breath, forcibly squeezing the dark shadow power within your massive body. The next second, with terrifying psychic fluctuations booming across the battlefield, you had successfully transformed into your warp essence unleashed state, with a raven's head and a human body. At this moment, Korax, who was weaving through and slaughtering countless traitor forces, suddenly turned his head and gazed at you. A hint of excited smile unconsciously appeared on his pale face. Korax already knew what powerful force you were now using. Given enough time, he himself could successfully master this mysterious power, far surpassing that of ordinary Primarchs. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Shadow clones, each wielding a shadow scythe, continuously materialized from your massive body. The addition of hundreds of thousands of shadow clones undoubtedly increased the speed at which you four Primarchs cleared the way, and the combat pressure from countless traitors gradually decreased significantly. Whether it was Corax, wielding his shadow claws, or Vulcan, spraying scorching fire back and forth, or Ferris, gripping his fire sword and engaging in mad slaughter, the quick-reacting Gene Seed Primarchs immediately seized the opportunity to cooperate with you, gaining time for more loyalist Astartes descendants to break through. Buzz, buzz, buzz. However, at this moment, in the depths of the gradually darkening sky of Istvan V, besides the continuous artillery trajectories, a tactical nuclear weapon from deep within the Iron Warriors' battle array was plummeting towards the position of you four Primarchs. Rumble. In a flash of lightning, Vulcan, his eyes wide with fury, suddenly propelled himself high off the ground using his dragon scales, and the Dawnbreaker tightly gripped in his palm forcefully struck the tactical nuclear weapon about to explode. And just as an incomparably dazzling, terrifying light and countless deadly impact waves completely engulfed Vulcan's massive body, you, with a raven's head and a human body, also suddenly unleashed countless dark shadows, successfully enveloping the tactical nuclear weapon's explosive flames that had not yet fully spread. Thank you for your support. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Boom. The terrifying power of the nuclear explosion was almost completely blocked by the pitch-black shadow you unleashed with all your might. This tactical nuclear weapon from the Iron Warriors also failed to completely wipe out all of you. Thanks to the fearless Vulcan and your desperate efforts to save them, only a small number of Astartes were annihilated into ashes by the explosive fire that leaked from the pitch-black shadow, due to their proximity to the nuclear blast center. However, all of this came at a heavy price. Vulcan, who was only a step away from the nuclear blast center, was completely unaccounted for, though you knew his powerful physique should have been enough for him to survive this nuclear explosion. Due to excessive consumption, you completely detached from the liberated state of your warp essence, temporarily unable to use any shadow power. At this moment, you, Ferris, Corax, and others didn't even have time to mourn Vulcan's disappearance, nor did you have time to search for his potential remains. You had to take advantage of the massive impact the tactical nuclear weapons explosion had on the chaotic battlefield and lead the remaining Astartes Legion out of the encirclement of the 8 traitor legions. Soon after, the three of you successfully led the remaining 20,000 salamanders and over 18,000 Raven Guard completely out of the landing zone encirclement set up by the traitor legions. However, the nerves of you three Primarchs remained taut. You knew this was only the first step in escaping the difficult situation. Corax, whose pitch-black shadow became increasingly active, immediately led thousands of Raven Guard veterans to engage in hit-and-run guerrilla warfare with the large number of pursuing traitor legions from the rear. You and Ferris led the combined forces of the Salamanders and Raven Guard legions rapidly towards the more complex terrain on Istvan V. Besides having to evade the pursuit of the traitor legions, you also had to constantly be wary of orbital bombardment from above. At this moment, having temporarily lost your psychic powers, you picked up your most proficient close combat methods once again. You handed over command of the Astartes back to Ferris. You, alone, wielding the glowing green blood scythe, undertook the rearguard mission for your remaining main force. Through the blood-stained skull helmet's eye slits, you watched as a large number of World Eaters wielding chainsword axes and demonically possessed warriors in full demon form rapidly encircled your position. Thump, thump, thump. Your breathing rhythm gradually quickened. Without any hesitation, you drove your vibranium power armor into a combat charge. Your entire massive body, like a heavy vehicle, crashed into a line of World Eaters' sturdy bodies, smashing the entire squad of Astartes into flying remnants of flesh and blood. The next second, Countless demon weapons from the demonically possessed warriors heavily struck the vibranium power armor's outer shell, emitting a deafening roar. You took a deep breath. The blood scythe, tightly gripped in your palm, rotated back and forth around the waistline of your power armor. One by one, the snarling demonically possessed warriors, as if trying to drown you in their tide, became the dead souls beneath your terrifying scythe, split into two incomplete halves. Hiss, hiss, hiss. And with your continuous, frantic slaughter and increasingly numb close combat movements, strands of sticky scarlet blood, seemingly seeping out from within your massive body, began to boil in the air. Your entire consciousness seemed to gradually blur, all your attention completely absorbed in the terrifying slaughter of countless traitor legions. By now, the number of Astartes who had died under your scythe had surpassed 1,000, and this number seemed to be no end. You, growing increasingly excited, even completely ignored the dissuading shouts from Ferris and Corax. At this very moment, your last shred of clear consciousness gradually realized that this was not, as you had previously thought, a blessing from Khorne, but rather the warp essence belonging to another Primarch that was being liberated and awakened. You successfully sensed that every muscle tissue throughout your body seemed to be swelling and erupting. A terrifying immense power, possibly far exceeding Angron or even Vulcan, was surging and boiling within your massive body. Roar. You let out a deafening roar at the countless traitor legions encircling you. You abruptly removed the skull helmet covering your head, and with your last shred of clear consciousness, sent a retreat signal to Ferris and Corax in the distance. And Ferris and Corax, witnessing your hair rapidly growing and turning dark red, and countless boiling blood surrounding your massive body, had no choice but to grit their teeth and abandon their concern for your safety. They immediately led more Astartes into a retreat towards the complex terrain of Istvan V. Once your allies had completely left your field of vision, you seemed to have completely fallen into a state of rage comparable to a Khorne greater demon. Countless artillery and bolter rounds from the traitor legions seemed to cause you little harm. Even the blood scythe, tightly gripped in your palm, seemed to have been stained with an utterly indelible, rich blood color. Every time you completed a frantic slaughter against the traitor legions, your massive body seemed to grow a few sizes out of thin air. Your terrifying physique, originally around 4 meters, gradually approached 5 meters. Your entire vibranium power armor hummed as it was stretched by your rapidly expanding muscle tissue, as if it could completely collapse at any moment. Boom, boom, boom. Seeing the increasing number of Astartes from the traitor legions, and even countless heavy vehicles appearing in your crimson vision, the blood scythe, tightly gripped in your palm, swept forward with all its might, cutting a large number of Astartes from the traitor legions into mutilated corpses. At the same time, the blood scythe's inherent blood-attracting ability seemed to have achieved some degree of fusion and sublimation with your gradually liberating warp essence. Hiss, hiss, hiss. In an instant, a massive blood scythe, with a radius of over 20 meters, rapidly condensed from the blood of countless Astartes corpses, suddenly swept across the sturdy bodies of countless Astartes from the ground. And the sticky blood continuously gushing and splashing from these Astartes, who instinctively let out fearful low roars as their sturdy bodies exploded, successfully made the massive blood scythe you had condensed grow larger and larger in both quality and scale. By the time 1,000 Astartes traitors had successfully died by your hand. On the increasingly terrifying and cruel battlefield, a terrifying gigantic blood scythe, with a combat range reaching hundreds of meters, was completely condensed within your field of vision. At the same time, a pair of crimson blood wings, with a wingspan of about 10 meters, completely formed from boiling blood, suddenly surged out from behind your broad back. Only at this moment did your last shred of clear consciousness fully understand that this was not, as you had previously thought, the awakening of Angron's warp essence. This was the brilliant blossoming of the warp essence belonging to the Archangel Sanguinius. 2 streams of crimson fire, like energy fluids, continuously gushed from the depths of your eyes. For Sanguinius, you, in a daze, instinctively let out a guttural, slurred roar, the deafening sound waves echoing across the entire chaotic battlefield. Thump thump thump. Having just awakened a new warp essence, you didn't hesitate to move your massive body, launching a furious charge, blood flames soaring, towards the densely packed traitor legion in your crimson field of vision. At this moment, almost no Astartes from the traitor legion could easily impede your heavy steps. The gigantic blood scythe, with a sweep range of about 500 meters, only swung forward once. Hundreds, even thousands, of Astartes traitors who couldn't dodge became nourishment for the gigantic blood scythe. This gigantic blood scythe, condensed from your hand, could sustain itself through battle, and its potential for growth seemed limitless. However, in the eyes of countless Astartes traitors, this Istvan v Carnage, originally aimed at several loyal Primarchs and loyal legions, seemed to be turning into their own burial ground. Rumble. Your massive body, during the charge, forcefully overturned heavy vehicles one after another. Amidst countless flying metal armor fragments and black sand, whistling large-caliber bolter rounds were continuously blocked by the viscous waters surrounding your body and your vibranium power armor. The fierce assault from the traitor legion couldn't even make you stop your awe-inspiring combat charge. The current you seemed far more terrifying than the chief corn grater demon. Hiss hiss hiss. Your increasingly crimson fire vision swept around, and the gigantic blood scythe once again launched a mighty sweeping absorption. Your two crimson blood wings, each over 10 meters long, suddenly extended forward from behind your broad back, and several Alpha Legion Astartes, who had silently approached, relying on fragmented corpses standing on the ground, were unfortunately completely enveloped by the changing crimson wings. The next second, as desperate shouts came from several Astartes, wisps of viscous blood continuously surged out from the power armor connection seams and the depths of their helmets' breathing valves. Rumble. At this moment, your charging steps, which had gradually penetrated deep into the traitor legion's massive formation, abruptly halted. Your massive body suddenly dodged quickly to the side. The next second, a brilliant energy beam, 10 meters in diameter, like a descending star, grazed your vibranium power armor with extreme precision. But the gigantic blood scythe, which you had condensed to an attack range of 700 to 800 meters, was largely evaporated by the terrifying energy, and the remaining viscous water had to return to your massive body. At this moment, you didn't even need to look back. You could clearly perceive through the countless viscous water entanglement around your body that a massive black sand dune, originally located directly behind you, had completely vanished into the hot, rising, turbid air. General Cannon, with only a sliver of conscious awareness remaining, you couldn't help but let out a terrifying, deafening roar. You completely ignored the batches of Astartes traitors still surging towards you, and utterly disregarded the power weapons about to land on your vibranium power armor and viscous water. With just one glance, your crimson fire vision found the General Cannon, an incredibly massive and powerful weapon, among the densely packed traitor legion. And this was seemingly one of the General Cannons personally gifted to Perturabo by Lionel Johnson, who was temporarily kept in the dark. Buzz buzz buzz. The countless viscous water entanglement around your massive body recondensed into an incredibly huge and terrifying blood scythe, initiating bloody massacres against the nearby Astartes traitors. You were about to move your powerful massive body to charge towards the location of that General Cannon. Click click click. Dozens of Domitar Ferrum-class automated combat robots, under the sacrificial cover of countless Astartes, had successfully reached your vicinity. And these powerful robot formations, collectively known as Iron Ring robots, were Perturabo's honor guard. If you hadn't guessed wrong, he was hidden nearby. Boom boom boom. At this moment, thousands of Olympia bolter rounds per minute, fired from the metallic palms of each Iron Ring robot, continuously exploded on your massive body, and the incessant impact of fire caused the countless viscous water surrounding your massive body to ripple in a strange, wave-like manner. You immediately swung the incredibly huge and terrifying blood scythe to launch a sharp counterattack, but the terrifying blood scythe, which was invincible against Astartes traitors, was less effective against automated combat robots without blood or signs of life. It was not as effective as the blood scythe's inherent destructive power. In the interval while you were changing your attack strategy, large gravity hammers, buzzing loudly, struck your massive body with extremely terrifying whistling sounds, forcing you to repeatedly retreat a few steps to one side. However, you quickly reacted and temporarily ended the furious assault of a dozen iron ring robots with the blood side held tightly in your massive palm. Perturabo, you instinctively let out a roar that echoed across the entire battlefield. As you rotated your head, with your dark red hair flying wildly, and searched for Perturabo's familiar figure with your fire-like crimson vision. Countless surviving iron ring robots decisively pounced on your massive body. They firmly restrained your flesh and blood body with their steel bodies, even if you struggled fiercely, tearing apart the metallic limbs of the iron ring robots. They showed no sign of retreat, having received Perturabo's orders. The next second, with another terrifying hum in the bloody air, a huge energy beam from the general cannon immediately struck your position again. In a flash, you, roaring and repeatedly entangled with dozens of iron ring robots, were enveloped together in the depths of this destructive energy impact. And as your massive body was annihilated inch by the scorching high temperature, almost like the interior of a star. In your crimson vision, the massive form of Perturabo's armor of the logos seemed to vaguely appear. Your incredibly powerful flesh and blood body was completely destroyed by the terrifying power of the general cannon. Your complete consciousness, however, gradually awakened from a blurry haze. You immediately realized what combat error you had just made. Perturabo, who had a very cautious combat style, decided not to engage in any close-quarters combat with you after learning that you had successively gravely wounded Fulgrim and Lorger. He used the iron ring robots of his honor guard as a deadly bait, gradually luring the irrational you into the general cannon's line of attack. This resulted in a glorious victory entirely belonging to him, and also laid some groundwork for your next meeting on Holy Terra. You let out a long sigh. You were undoubtedly very happy to successfully awaken Sanguinius's warp essence. However, once you entered Sanguinius's warp awakening, you basically lost your combat rationality, seeming to enter a side effect of a bloodthirst and black rage superposition, which was also one of the great troubles this warp essence brought you. Wait, what is this place? However, at this moment, you, who were frowning in thought, suddenly perceived something. Why hadn't your consciousness withdrawn from this simulated training yet? Where exactly had you arrived at this moment? Buzz, buzz, buzz. You, who had just understood, suddenly felt a massive malice that seemed to penetrate deep into your soul. You instinctively raised your head, only to see a terrifying existence that looked like a black hole and also like a yin-yang constant star. That was the sixth chaos god that would only be born in the future, yet would instantly exist in the past and present. Luo Sha. Instantly, your eyes seemed to burn fiercely, and your vision became incredibly blurry. You seemed to hear countless desperate wails and painful roars of shattered souls on the brink of death. Even your brain, hidden within your thick skull, seemed to be gradually boiling and churning. Mortals cannot gaze directly upon a god. Even if you were a gene seed primarch with top-tier combat power, you had not yet grown to the point where you could gaze at him from close range. Your massive body painfully knelt in a pitch-black void. We must ascend to godhood. A superimposed murmur from Luo Sha echoed repeatedly in your ears. At this moment, your massive body, which you tried to curl up, began to tremble uncontrollably, and 2 lines of pale golden blood tears quickly flowed from the depths of your eyes. However, your incredibly resilient soul and consciousness did not easily yield under his terrifying deterrence. Resisting the intense pain from your entire body, you slowly raised your lowered head. I ascend your mother's godhood. You gnashed your teeth and let out a deafening roar at the 6th chaos god. The next second, your entire soul and consciousness were completely torn into countless finer fragments by a powerful gravitational force rapidly surging from all directions. Your soul fragments seemed to have been copied countless times, then cast into various points on the timeline. Your remaining blurry consciousness also gradually embarked on the path of annihilation and disappearance. You died. This simulation has ended, time unknown. The savable options for this simulation are as follows. 1. The Forging Hand of Vulcan, Lord of the Fire Dragons Primarch Sacred Relic. Note: the forging hand is one of the assembly components of the gene seed Primarch Vulcan, Lord of the Fire Dragon's S-Power Armor, Dragon Scale. It integrates a heavy flamer, and the terrifying scorching flames launched from the forging hand are almost impossible for anyone to easily resist. Note: the forging hand is also one of the 9 sacred relics Vulcan left to his salamander's descendants. It is said that once all 9 relics are found and gathered, Vulcan, Lord of the Fire Dragons, will return to the human empire, but some more rational and pragmatic salamander's descendants also believe this is merely a beautiful hope left by the Gene Father to his descendants. Note: currently, more than half of the 9 sacred relics have successfully appeared. Heshton, the Forge Father of the Salamanders, spent countless efforts to find the Spear of Vulcan, the Cloak of Caesara, and now the Forging Hand, which belongs to you. The Obsidian Chariot was obtained by a mysterious Astartes who has long been involved with orcs. Currently, the Engine of Woe, the Fire of Cutting, and the Song of Entropy have not yet been discovered by anyone. Note: my precious Heshton, the Forge Father, let out an extremely desperate cry of pain upon unexpectedly discovering the forging hand had vanished into thin air. 2. Engine of the God of Machines, General Cannon Normal. Note: this is an extremely ancient general cannon, and one of the most powerful war machines that the human empire can control and command. It is said that their numbers are far scarcer than the war titans of the Titan legions. Note: the specific models of general cannons are named according to their purpose. Some general cannons can destroy one or even several heavily fortified hive cities with a single shot. Some general cannons are magnificent engines specifically designed to counter enemy titans. It is also said that there are even scarcer general cannons that can transport an entire legion from underground to a designated target location. However, the Adeptus Mechanicus strictly keeps the existence of general cannons secret, and only the 100 Machine Guard, a chapter specifically maintaining and caring for giant and super giant weapons like general cannons, can know everything about them. Note: Sons of the Iron Warriors, bring me the general cannon Lionel Johnson gave me, aim it at Luo Sha and hit him hard. Perturabo, gazing at you wildly slaughtering among countless Astartes, roared expressionlessly. 3. Rib of Steel, Ferrus Manus's Legacy, Primarch. Note: this is a special implanted creation formed by reprocessing and melting Ferrus Manus's living metal arm, which was fused with his Primarch bloodline. This was originally an enhancement surgery for Primaris Astartes. Note: it seems to have been strengthened and blessed by the Emperor, and once again blessed by the 6th Chaos God, Luo Sha. Note: the Rib of Steel is also known as a tendon coil. These completely activated metal coils will be implanted into every inch of your tendons, allowing your already powerful physical strength to once again gain a large increase in contraction and burst, and even gradually amplify your physical strength to a terrifying degree comparable to or even surpassing Vulcan. In addition, the activated Rib of Steel will also give you a far greater defensive capability than before, and because the tendon coil has received a strong blessing from Ferrus Manus, the Lord of the Cursed Legion, a portion of his warp essence requires you to delve deep to possess it. Note: in the depths of the cold void, inside the massive bridge of a Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, heading towards Holy Terra, Ferrus Manus, his massive body covered in scars, gazed calmly at the 4 blood-side replicas placed on his neck, and the 4 expressionless time remnants of Luo Sha in front of him. He said in a cold tone, "You are not my little brother at all, you are just a group of abominations from the depths of the warp." As soon as he finished speaking, Ferrus Manus's noble head once again flew into the sky. Note: you must embark on the path to godhood, there is no other choice, just as Ferrus must die, because the Emperor's cursed legion needs a loyal leader. A terrifying existence, shaped like a black hole devouring all things, yet also like a yin-yang constant star, murmured to you, and the cold sun not too far from him did not voice a rebuttal. The two sides sometimes engaged in incredibly fierce collisions, stirring all chaotic matters in the depths of the warp, and sometimes joined hands for a more noble purpose, reshuffling and dealing with the 4 great masters born in the high heavens. Chapter 984, The Iron Fist returns from the past. The moment this simulated experience ended, Luo Sha, whose massive body was seated on a metal throne, suddenly opened his tightly shut eyes. Poof! A large plume of pale golden blood mist violently sprayed out from his nose and mouth. This blood mist even rapidly formed a large area of intensely burning psionic flames in the air. Primarch, my lord. At the same time, Craig, the leader of the giant Raven Guard, and Carden, the Iron Fathers, who had just finished their simulated experience, immediately noticed the Primarch my lord's abnormality. They couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Luo Sha, with a calm expression, immediately waved his vibranium hand slightly at the two who were about to step forward, indicating that his injuries were not serious. This seemed to be the first time Luo Sha had shown an inability to suppress his injuries after a simulated experience. It seemed that even the Emperor's blessing might not be able to completely withstand the terrifying power of the sixth Chaos God. I'm fine, no need to make a fuss. What did you two experience later? Were you already killed when the landing zone battle began? At this moment, Luo Sha, whose gaze was fixed on the two towering figures below, subtly changed the subject. He casually inquired about Craig and Carden's experiences. However, to Luo Sha's surprise, the person who truly survived until the end was not Craig, the leader of the giant Raven Guard. The latter, in his giant form, perished along with hundreds of World Eaters and a large number of Word-Bearers librarians in the early stages of the battle. On the contrary, Carden, the Iron Fathers, fought and retreated, even successfully meeting Ferrus Manus, who had not died on the spot, in the later stages of the battle. Respected Dark Side Regent my lord, thank you and the Emperor's great power for allowing me to personally meet our Gene Father. This is an opportunity countless Iron Hand's descendants have dreamed of, and after I had a detailed conversation with Ferrus my lord about some important matters concerning the future, the thoughtful Ferrus my lord ordered me to make some significant changes. That is to say, from the moment I return, although Ferrus my lord is still our nominal Gene Father, you will replace Ferrus my lord as the Primarch of countless Iron Hand's descendants, even those sub-warbands that have separated from the Iron Hands, such as the Medusa Warband, must acknowledge this, otherwise they will become recognized heretics and traitors among countless Ferrus descendants. At this moment, Carden, the Iron Fathers, with an incredibly resolute face, spoke to Luo Sha not far away with a firm tone. And facing the Steel Hands battle group, who had chosen to completely pledge allegiance to him, Luo Sha, who already liked to collect Astartes' descendants, immediately agreed to all of their requests. However, when Luo Sha ordered Carden, the Iron Fathers, to prepare the entire warband for battle, and that he would lead all the Iron Hands to retrieve the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, that once belonged to Ferrus, Carden, the Iron Fathers, with a hint of confusion and doubt in his brows, spoke to Luo Sha. But, Primarch my lord, our Iron Fist is clearly docked at the large spaceport of the Iron Ring. Hearing the other party's words, Luo Sha raised an eyebrow and couldn't help but let out a surprised gasp. The Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, is a massive giant ship, 20 kilometers long. Since Ferrus was involved in its initial design, it not only possessed defensive capabilities and firepower far exceeding ships of the same class but also had the special function of large-scale production internally. If the various resource reserves were adequate, the Iron Fist alone could become a super space warship capable of sustaining itself through war. At this moment, inside a private room belonging to Ferrus himself on the upper deck of the ship, Luo Sha, with an extremely solemn expression, was meticulously reading all the text information after the simulation ended. His gaze quickly swept over the first two simulation rewards, focusing specifically on the various annotations attached to the third reward. Once all the important information had fully entered the depths of Luo Sha's mind, he unconsciously exhaled from his nose and mouth. I didn't expect Ferrus still couldn't escape his headless fate. The sixth Chaos God is truly going to great lengths to make me embark on the path to godhood. In a sense, I am the true culprit who killed Ferrus, because it was also my soul fragments that became time remnants in the hands of the Chaos Gods. Luo Sha thought silently, his cold eyes flickering. Furthermore, because Ferris himself survived for a period longer, the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, which was accidentally heavily damaged by the Traitor Legion and subsequently went missing, was inadvertently successfully preserved by the Steel Hands battle group. This is also the first time I have personally witnessed a significant change in the timeline. Whether it is good or bad, only the Emperor, that old man, knows. Thinking of this, Luo Sha, whose eyes flickered a few times, immediately temporarily scrolled the simulator's reward page to the prayer support mission page. In the center of the Golden Throne's background, the exclusive Loki missions belonging to the Schemer and Korn were still pinned at the top. However, when Luo Sha carefully examined the text description, he found that in Korn's exclusive mission, the name of the Gloriana-class battleship had changed from Iron Fist to the Wolf King Lehman Russ's Hrothgar. This uncompleted reward mission has been forcibly changed by some power. What exactly is going on? Did the sixth Chaos God secretly make a move, or is it a special change caused by the altered timeline? At this moment, Luo Sha, feeling his thoughts becoming increasingly chaotic and complex, had to forcibly stop thinking. Since he couldn't get the real answer no matter what now, there was no need to force it. Luo Sha calmed his mind slightly. He casually scrolled the simulator page back to the reward page and then directly selected the enhanced surgery reward. Buzz buzz buzz. In an instant, Luo Sha's eyes widened sharply. His keen senses could clearly perceive countless cold, yet scorching, tendon coils appearing out of thin air within his massive body, one by one. Every inch of his strong muscles, tempered by countless wars, was autonomously contracting and vibrating, then perfectly merging with the tendon coils. Immediately after, Luo Sha's already massive body, which was about 4 meters tall, seemed to swell by another large circle, successfully reaching a height of about 4.5 meters. And the vibranium power armor that completely covered his body also had to emit a series of creaking, twisting metal sounds. This second-generation Spark Glory power armor can't hold up anymore. I hope Redditus has made all the preparations. Luo Sha looked down at the vibranium power armor that was beginning to twist and deform, muttering to himself. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 985, 3rd Generation Starfire Glory in Extremis. Between the cold void, one after another massive Calamity Legion ships were repeatedly entering and exiting Medusa's Iron Halo starport. Countless released automatic servo robots were working with the Steel Hands battle group's servitors and tech priests to maintain and repair every single ship. And inside the even larger, rhomboid Hero Tower. Under the bright lights, Luo Sha, whose massive body was clad only in loose casual clothes, stood before Redditus and AI Stark. At present, the three of them were positioned in a perfect triangle. And right in the center of the three individuals, a large pile of strange matter, resembling space Necron's living metal yet continuously shimmering with vibranium luster, slowly writhed within a transparent containment box. Luo Sha, with his hands crossed over his thick shoulders, remained silent for a moment. He looked down at AI Stark, who stood opposite him, and asked, "Tony, what are these things?" I won't go into the overly complex physics formulas and basic principles with you, since you wouldn't understand anyway. Do you remember some of the ancient Dark Age of technology legacies we received from the Dark Angels battle group? I successfully used a portion of the nanoscopic robots that we can completely control as a basic blueprint, supplemented by living metal from the space Necrons, plus indestructible vibranium material, to create this special product that I've temporarily named Extremis. Of course, the term virus merely describes its inherent invasiveness and self-replication speed, as the essence of this special product is a cluster of countless nanoscopic robots that can devour all metal substances and undergo a beneficial evolution. At this moment, AI Stark, his illusory head flickering back and forth, spoke in a deep voice towards Luo Sha. Although he tried his best to hide the excitement in his words, Luo Sha could still sense the genuine joy emanating from him. "Tony, while I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm, I also hope you've prepared a contingency plan in case this thing unexpectedly goes out of control. You haven't failed to read those ancient records about the Iron Man Rebellion, where a rampaging tide of nanoscopic robots devoured entire star systems, have you? I certainly don't want my entire fleet to become nourishment for this thing's growth one day. Luo Sha, his expression slightly cold, said in a deep voice. And AI Stark quickly patted his mechanical power armor, assuring him that he had made all necessary preparations. Nodding slightly, Luo Sha immediately focused his gaze on Reditus, who was suspended in midair. Reditus, did you see the message I sent you earlier? The second-generation Starfire Glory can no longer support my current body. Do you have any new ideas about this? As Luo Sha's words fell, Reditus, who was circling back and forth in midair, propelled by his gravity engine, immediately exclaimed. Aha, my Lord Primarch, I had already anticipated this, and thus, while I was constantly in the Hero Tower conducting various forbidden researches with Stark, I also took the time to create a set of third-generation Starfire Glory power armor for you. At this moment, Reditus's excited words echoed in Luo Sha's ears. And with the data information he sent, teams of automatic servo robots, moving cautiously, slowly pushed a massive metal container, about 5 meters tall, closer to the three individuals. My Lord Primarch, please look this way. The third-generation Starfire Glory power armor still retains the sturdy and durable basic color you've always required. The more purified vibranium power armor shell, after meticulous adjustment and special forging, currently faces no threat from most alien technology weapons. And based on the numerous pieces of information you've provided daily, the vibranium wings are somewhat redundant. Therefore, I've directly integrated the entire propulsion system into the power armor. The thrusters are located at the bottom of the magnetic boots and the back of the power pack. Additionally, I've completely transformed the original position of the vibranium wings into 4 hidden servo arms. When you need them, you can freely control these servo arms via a neural interface. Reditus, suspended in midair, introduced the great advantages of the third-generation Starfire Glory power armor to Luo Sha. He simultaneously demonstrated a series of movements with the power armor standing inside the massive container. Thump, thump, thump. As Reditus quickly shook his small mechanical arms and sent a large amount of data code. This massive power armor, whose external volume alone was about 5 meters tall, immediately staggered and stepped onto the metal floor. Immediately after, 4 servo arms, with even thicker vibranium joints resembling octopus tentacles, suddenly extended from the back of the massive power armor and grabbed several automatic servo robots that couldn't dodge in time. Dear my Lord Primarch, frankly speaking, the third-generation Starfire Glory power armor doesn't offer a significant increase in strength itself. It barely surpasses the second generation among many Primarch-level power armors. After you repeatedly mentioned that your physical strength had far exceeded previous levels, I completely focused the research direction of this power armor on defensive capabilities and flexibility. A large number of self-repairing vibranium energy shields cover every inch of this power armor. And for the long-range attack modes you might need, I've also prepared alternative solutions primarily based on large-caliber firepower modules. The advantage is that they can be used on demand, but the disadvantage is that if not pre-installed, there might not be time for preparation on a chaotic battlefield. Currently, your choices for long-range firepower include a smaller, more concentrated laser cannon, a multi-barreled thermal destroyer, and a Gauss cannon from the Space Necrons. At this moment, Reditus's words continuously echoed in Luo Sha's ears. Even AI Stark, who stood by watching the spectacle, occasionally showed an expression of appreciation for a satisfactory work. It seemed he too had participated in Reditus's secret plan to create the third-generation Starfire Glory power armor. And Luo Sha had his hands crossed over his thick arms. His eyes, unconsciously narrowed, gazed at the power armor helmet, which still retained its skull-like shape. A faint smile slowly appeared on his lips. Reditus, you've done a good job. In light of this new power armor, I won't hold you two accountable for accidentally tinkering with the nanoscopic robot, Extremis. Of course, I must remind you two again, make sure all defensive measures are in place in the Hero Tower. If there isn't a strong method to completely counter these nanoscopic robots, I don't want to see them appear on any battlefield, understood? Thank you for your support. Inside the large training ground in the upper cabin of the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist. Luo Sha, wearing his third-generation Starfire Glory vibranium power armor, stood in the vast, empty space. In his two massive hands, he tightly gripped the heavy, dark Dawnbreaker, and the green glowing blood scythe. Thump, thump, thump. The next second, Luo Sha, with a slightly solemn expression, suddenly opened his tightly closed eyes, and a flash of shadow and scarlet flickered deep within his gaze. As his light gold magnetic boots repeatedly clanked against the thick metal floor, strands of dark shadow instantly appeared on the sharp blade of the blood scythe, then swept outwards into the surrounding air. Immediately after, drops of scarlet psyche, resembling viscous blood, quickly covered the Dawnbreaker, gradually boiling as Luo Sha's offensive moves became increasingly sharp. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, shadow clones, each holding various shadow weapons in their palms, instantly materialized from within Luo Sha's massive body. These shadow clones immediately changed their direction of attack, launching a continuous siege against the nearby Luo Sha. Bang, bang, bang. The Dawnbreaker, imbued with a good deal of scarlet psyche, landed heavily among the numerous shadow clones like a battering ram. Bursts of invisible vibrating impact caused the shadow clones to dissipate on the spot, and countless dark shadows immediately returned to Luo Sha's body. If the Raven King's shadow power makes me seem more like a powerful psyker, then Sanguinius's bloody power is clearly suited for close combat, and can sustain war on a large scale. The more enemies there are, the greater the threat of the bloody power. At this moment, Luo Sha, whose every offensive move had abruptly ceased, lowered his head slightly. He looked down at the two close combat weapons in his two massive hands and murmured to himself. The only problem with the bloody power currently is that it gradually leads me into a side effect of losing my sanity. This is nowhere near as useful as shadow power. I hope long-term integration will allow me to completely adapt to, and even conquer, this major drawback. Taking a deep breath, Luo Sha slowly lowered his two massive hands. As the dark shadow and viscous blood quickly dissipated, the Dawnbreaker and blood scythe were restored in his storage page. Luo Sha, driving his brand new third-generation Starfire Glory, walked towards the exit at the edge of the large training ground. However, before he could leave, the burly and strong Iron Father's Cardin and the even taller Tiberos arrived before Luo Sha. My Lord Primarch, the Iron Hands, Key of Hell, dark technology is currently being safely transferred to the Hero Tower, and approximately 3,000 more subjects stored from the past are being transferred to the new flagship, which is this Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist. Iron Father's Cardin, who completely regarded Luo Sha as his gene father, said in a deep voice towards Luo Sha. Subjects. Speaking of which, I only know that your Iron Hands, Key of Hell, is an extremely precious and powerful dark technology, but what exactly is the Key of Hell? An ancient artifact or something else? Luo Sha, with slightly raised eyebrows, gazed at Iron Father's Cardin and asked. As soon as he finished speaking, Iron Father's Cardin explained without any hesitation. Reporting, My Lord Primarch, the Key of Hell is a series of mysterious technologies that can be repeatedly operated and used. To put it simply, it is the unrestricted resurrection of the dead. Taking our Iron Hands as an example, whether a subject of the Key of Hell is cut in half, or has half of their body smashed, or only has half a brain left. Of course, if the opponent's brain is completely destroyed, it is completely ineffective. These subjects, after a series of modification technologies, will be resurrected from the state of death. However, this does not mean that the Key of Hell is a safe technology that we can use repeatedly. When my Lord Ferris obtained this ancient technology, which far exceeded imagination, he always restricted our usage times and scale. According to my memory, the subject's body surface will completely turn grayish-white, and parts of the body will even show a metallic luster. After the modification is complete, they theoretically retain their past memories, but have completely lost emotions, and I even suspect they have completely lost this function. The combat power of any subject will be greatly enhanced, their strength and close combat ability are extremely terrifying, and even their defensive ability is close to impenetrable. They have strong resistance to bolter and laser cannons, because they themselves no longer have any hesitation or fear, and will instead execute any action 100%, including suicidal or even extermination missions. At this moment, Iron Father's Carden, with an extremely solemn expression, spoke to Luo Sha with great caution. But at the same time, because these subjects retain their memories, the Astartes' tactical and combat skills are also fully preserved. Even if they are cut in half on the spot, their bodies are riddled with holes again, or even if only a head remains, they will mercilessly and unhesitatingly launch a terrifying slaughter against the enemy, until the opponent dies or their own side is completely annihilated. In addition, even those dreadnoughts can be technically modified by the Key of Hell. Once the modification is successful, whether it's electronic signals or machine spirit systems, etc., all conventional operating signals and characteristics will completely disappear, leaving only a high-frequency vibrating electromagnetic field whose source cannot be detected. This means that if the enemy does not know in advance, no one can detect or intercept the subjects, because even the Iron Hands, who possess this terrifying technology, do not know what power or source is supporting their actions and combat. At this moment, Iron Father's Carden's words made Luo Sha frown. Even Tiberos, who stood silently listening, cast his gaze upon the other's burly physique. A horde of fearless undead with grayish-white bodies is their specific external manifestation. How do I feel like I've seen such a strange thing before? Luo Sha, muttering to himself, subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Because the Key of Hell subjects described by Iron Father's Carden vaguely reminded him of the time remnants of the sixth Chaos God. Could it be that some power controlled by the other party is the Iron Hands, Key of Hell, technology? Carden, from today onwards, you will be the company commander of the Calamity Legion Iron Hands Company. In addition to being responsible for all matters of the Iron Hands, you will also bear the great responsibility of guarding the Key of Hell. Unless my Calamity Legion suffers extremely heavy casualties, I will not easily activate the Key of Hell. Thank you all for your support. As time slowly passed, outside the Iron Halo spaceport on Medusa Planet, vast metal ships, having completed their overhaul and inspection, were densely packed. In fact, with the number of ships Luo Sha currently possesses, it is already comparable to an Imperial combined fleet that an Imperial segmentum could barely assemble. If the specific number of Astartes is also taken into account, then in terms of combat power alone, Luo Sha can be said to be the most powerful warlord in the entire human empire. Even Regent Gilliman's Indomitus Crusade fleet cannot compare to Luo Sha's forces. Because even a Primarch cannot guarantee that all the forces under his command will obey one person's voice 100%. But Luo Sha can easily do this. This is not only because everything in the Calamity Legion, whether ships or Astartes companies, was accumulated by him personally, but also because he tries his best to treat everyone within the Legion with a fairness and justice completely different from that of the human empire. Perhaps some of his methods for handling affairs still retain the bureaucratic habits and ruthless style of the human empire, but this is also an important foundation for Luo Sha to continue to survive in this cold galaxy. Soon after, the Astartes from the Iron Hands Company, after retaining a portion of the planetary defense fleet and garrison troops, almost all joined the Calamity Legion. They also became another Astartes company to join the Calamity Legion, following the Carcharodon's Great Company, Raven Guard Company, Blood Raven Company, Lamenter's Great Company, Alpha Company, and Silver Skull Great Company. As for the Black Templars, White Scars, and other companies that are still small in number, they are continuously developing towards the size of a great company. Perhaps in the future, they can become one of the main great companies of the Calamity Legion. In addition, under Luo Sha's secret authorization, the garrison troops on Medusa planet will completely abandon the restrictions of the Astartes Codex. They will increase the number of Astartes conscriptions, striving to restore to the massive scale of the Great Crusade era. After all matters were temporarily concluded, the increasingly vast Calamity Legion fleet slowly departed Medusa planet, embarking once again on the long journey to support Regent Guilliman. Luo Sha also increasingly looked forward to meeting Guilliman again. He even wanted to know what state the other party would be in after seeing Omegan again. The flagship of the Calamity Legion. Inside the upper hall of the Steel Fist, Gloriana-class battleship. Luo Sha, whose massive body was clad in vibranium power armor, was sending teams of fully armed Astartes combat squads deep into a warp gate for support missions. He had unexpectedly discovered during a recent prayer for support that some support prayers, which had relatively smaller battlefield scales and combat difficulties, no longer required him to lead personally. Astartes squads, whose individual combat power and weaponry could be described as luxurious, could complete them independently. Luo Sha only needed to open the return warp gate at the predetermined time. Thus, after Luo Sha ventured a try, he immediately let more Astartes participate. As a result, although Astartes from various companies would still experience combat casualties in various situations, Luo Sha's Golden Throne coins count reached triple digits for the first time, which was over 100 coins. Buzz buzz buzz. At this moment, Luo Sha, who was diligently sifting through suitable missions on the prayer support page, suddenly raised his head. He gazed with a bewildered expression at a warp gate that was gradually opening in front of many Astartes and company captains. "This is not our warp gate. All Astartes immediately raise your vigilance and protect my Lord Primarch." Chief Librarian Kahulanji of the Carcharodons, gripping his power staff tightly in his palm, sharply turned his pale face. He issued a warning to the surrounding company captains and Astartes. Thump thump thump. The next second, hundreds of Astartes from the Carcharodons and Iron Hands immediately erected vibranium energy shields. They held storm bolters and firmly surrounded the rapidly expanding and tearing warp gate. Immediately after, the Librarian brothers from the Blood Raven Company and Silver Skulls also swiftly drove their Terminator power armor forward. With repeated swings of their power staves, layers of incredibly thick psychic shields fell upon the sturdy bodies of many Astartes. A large amount of psychic sorcery, ready to be unleashed, was also gradually condensed in their palms. Once traces of chaos demon or warp creatures were discovered, they would be immediately thrown. And Luo Sha, sitting on the giant throne, also casually closed the simulator page. Within one of his massive palms, dark shadows and viscous blood repeatedly intertwined and churned. Click click click. In an instant, a golden magnetic boot slowly stepped out of the completely stabilized warp gate. Under the silent gaze of Luo Sha and many Astartes, a strange figure, clad in a golden power armor, holding a long sword and a holy grail, with a pair of pure white wings growing from his broad back, slowly entered the upper hall of the Steel Fist. Luo Sha, his expression growing colder, gazed at the golden mask covering the other party's face, a mask almost identical to Sanguinius's exquisite features. Streaks of dark shadows and viscous blood violently erupted from his massive body. "Who gave you the audacity to impersonate my Primarch brothers?" At this moment, a scarlet light, like fluid flames, rapidly flowed from the depths of Luo Sha's eyes. His massive body, intertwined with countless dark shadows, vanished from the giant throne as if teleporting. When the dark shadows of the shadow step quickly dissipated, Luo Sha's massive body had already arrived in front of the strange figure. A heavy, dark dawnbreaker, carrying an incredibly piercing shriek, heavily descended towards the other party's head. "Sanguinor greets my lord Luo Sha. I have been commanded by the Archangel Sanguinius to come and request your support." At this moment, a faint, low voice slowly entered Luo Sha's ears. When Luo Sha heard the other party's words, the dawnbreaker that was about to fall suddenly halted in midair, even just an inch away from the other party's head. If you dare to deceive me in the name of Sanguinius, even if you hide in the depths of the warp afterwards, I will personally find you and make you regret all your current decisions. Luo Sha, with a cold expression, stared intently at the other party. He slowly spoke word by word to the strange being who called himself Sanguinor. Thank you for your support. The existence of Sanguinor was an incredibly ancient legend for most Blood Angels and their successor chapters. No one knew who he was, or what he was. Even Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels warband, a veteran who had dedicated over a millennium to the Emperor and the human empire, had only barely seen Sanguinor's golden figure a few times during moments of crisis for the Blood Angels. The chapter priest secretly speculated that Sanguinor might be the embodiment of ideals and nobility that accidentally split from Sanguinius's soul when he was killed by Horus. Meanwhile, members of the Blood Guard speculated that he might be Azkaelan, the captain of the Blood Guard 10,000 years ago. In fact, even Luo Sha's current understanding of Sanguinor was limited. It was only based on the scattered words the Howling Griffins brought out from within the Blood Angels warband at the beginning of their chapter's separation. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, Luo Sha, with a slightly solemn expression, drove his vibranium power armor and returned to the massive throne in the upper hall. The large number of Astartes and company captains gathered around were clearly filled with vigilance towards the sudden, unfamiliar presence. Even though Luo Sha had asked them to temporarily put down their weapons and retreat to the side of the hall to wait quietly. But these loyal sons were still prepared to launch an attack first. Tell me, what are you? Some kind of warp entity? Or a fragmented piece of my brother's soul scattered outside? Or perhaps the Emperor's spokesman? Luo Sha, instinctively narrowing his eyes, repeatedly scrutinized Sanguinor, who stood below. The countless bright lights from the upper hall illuminated his golden armor, making it faintly glow, as if emitting strands of psychic light that did not belong to chaos. At present, he had made guesses about every possible identity of the person before him, because he himself was the most vivid example. However, Sanguinor, who slightly lifted his golden mask, did not seem to intend to reveal his true identity. He was silent for a moment, then spoke faintly towards Luo Sha. Primarch Luo Sha, I have come for the sons of Sanguinius. They are now about to face an unprecedented catastrophe, located on Baal, the homeworld of the Blood Angels. The true main fleet of the Leviathan tendril could arrive in the star system where the homeworld of Baal is located at any time. Even if I believe that the United Angel Sons can barely withstand this endless disaster with their own strength, their casualties and losses will far exceed the human empire's imagination. I cannot stand by and watch Sanguinius's sons become the biomass of the Tyrannid. I assume that as Sanguinius's Primarch brothers, you also do not wish to merely observe his sons facing such a scale of deadly crisis alone, do you? Sanguinor's words had just fallen. Luo Sha, with a slight frown, stared intently at his golden figure, seemingly wanting to see through everything behind that golden mask. Then, he took a deep breath and said indifferently, leaving aside whether the entire fleet can arrive in time, how do I know you're not deceiving me? Perhaps you are just a part of Chaos's plan to disrupt my subsequent arrangements. However, in the face of Luo Sha's somewhat confrontational suspicion, Sanguinor showed no emotion whatsoever. He seemed to ponder for a moment, then looked up and said, because you have no choice. Sanguinius's own remains are stored on the homeworld of Baal. Once the Blood Angels and their successor chapters fail to defend Baal, the Tyrannid will obtain all the secrets of the Geneseed Primarch. At that time, if the Tyrannid that the human empire has to face are all terrifying existences comparable to a Primarch, then both the warp and the real universe will be utterly defeated. I am not exaggerating. As a Primarch, you naturally know the truth of my words. At this moment, Sanguinor's calm words finally caused Luo Sha's expression to change significantly for the first time. From his understanding of the Tyrannid, the Great Devourer could indeed cultivate and select combat units for any devouring battlefield by absorbing various foreign genes. Even when facing completely different enemies, they would evolve specialized Tyrannid units with targeted abilities. This was the racial talent of the Tyranid, and one of their most troublesome aspects apart from their sheer numbers. To some extent, the Gene Seed Primarch was an existence that even the Chaos Gods would covet. Even if there was only a broken, soulless remains on Baal now, if this Primarch body were unfortunately consumed by the Tyranid. Then, from now on, the human empire and even the entire galaxy would likely become even more irredeemable, and the already ceaseless terrifying war might even continue until the entropy of the universe. Sanguinor, do you dare to guarantee to me that not a single word you just spoke is false or a lie? At this moment, Luo Sha, his facial expression gradually turning cold, suddenly asked Sanguinor in a strong tone. Strands of dark shadows and viscous blood repeatedly rose and fell, rotating ceaselessly, on the surface of his massive body. I swear to you in the name of Sanguinius, I guarantee that not a single word I have spoken is false. This time, without your strong support, I fear that the Blood Angel's homeworld of Baal and countless angel sons will become a swan song, ceasing to exist. Sanguinor's low words echoed like enchanting, swirling notes in the ears of Luo Sha and everyone present. And after a very brief moment of thought, Luo Sha, making an immediate decision, sternly ordered Tiberos, the company captain of the Carcharodon's great company, who stood inside the hall. Tiberos, immediately notify the entire fleet, change the current navigation route, and set the target to Baal. Immediately after, Luo Sha's cold gaze turned towards the librarian brothers, led by Chief Librarian Kahulanji of the Carcharodons. Kalanki, you immediately take people to contact the Human Federation Council on Native Terra, have Iron Man David prepare large-scale war materials, mobilize the Mortal Guard apart from the defense forces, and also remember to notify the Lamenter's Great Company, who are long-term stationed on Native Terra. The Blood Angels Warband needs the support of their successor chapter. Luo Sha's series of orders had just been issued. Tiberos, nodding heavily, and Kahulanji and others, with extremely solemn expressions, immediately drove their power armor and ran towards the outside of the upper hall. And Luo Sha, with psychic power surging on his massive body, once again scanned the Astartes and the various company captains present. My sons, this time we will absolutely encounter an apocalyptic-level terrifying battle. This is a major test for the Calamity Legion, and also a major test for me, your Primarch. But I believe even more that you will surely achieve this victory for me, and achieve this great victory for the Emperor and even the human empire. Because you are the Emperor's angel, the human empire's Astartes. And loyal sons with the Primarch's blood flowing through your veins. For the Emperor. For the human empire, and for all humanity. Thank you for your support. Native Universe, Terra. As the first rays of morning sunlight pierced through the biting cold wind, scattering across what was once the Himalayan mountain range. Countless metal walls, so thick that even large-caliber laser cannons or large-scale artillery attacks could barely breach them, gleamed with an incredibly dazzling metallic luster. The Himalayan mountain range had now been completely transformed into a super palace, its interior hollowed out, yet still built into the mountainside. Although the master of this super palace had not returned here for a long time. Everything within it seemed to be continuously developing according to a predetermined plan and route. And atop the metal palace, with an overall elevation of 8,848 meters. Besides countless accumulated snow and rugged boulders, the colossal golden insignias belonging to the Calamity Legion and the human empire shone brightly under the cold sunlight. Buzz buzz buzz. Just then, a deep roar of engines faintly echoed from the azure sky. A Thunderhawk transport, belonging to the Astartes, sped towards the landing platform of the Himalayan palace. Once the booming Thunderhawk transport had come to a complete stop, a burly figure, clad in power armor for mortals, descended from the open cabin door. He looked like a serious middle-aged inquisitor. A carefully groomed black mustache adorned his slightly pursed lips. However, the faint fine wrinkles between his brows and the white hair sprouting at his temples hinted that his true age seemed to far exceed imagination. At this moment, the middle-aged inquisitor subconsciously scanned the familiar surroundings. He casually waved a hand towards the towering figure of a Lamenter's Terminator who emerged from within the Thunderhawk transport. Then, he walked into the Himalayan palace on his own. After he slowly maneuvered his power armor for mortals, passing through several intelligent inspection barriers and unexpectedly encountering over a dozen Smart Control Legion patrols, he finally arrived at a vast meeting hall, large enough to accommodate Titan machines. And next to an oversized metal round table in the giant meeting hall, a pitch-black skeleton, draped in a living metal robe, was processing a large number of complex matters from across native Terra and even the depths of the universe at a super speed far exceeding ordinary artificial intelligence. Grand Inquisitor Peter Parker, you're here. Please wait a moment, I'm currently remotely assisting a Raven Guard fleet with some minor issues. Surrounded by numerous virtual screens, Iron Man David, without lifting his head, casually spoke to Grand Inquisitor Peter Parker. At this moment, from Peter Parker's perspective, the virtual screen displays also showed that the so-called minor issues were the Raven Guard Astartes landing forces rapidly clearing alien species from a life-sustaining planet. Is it another planet occupied by the Kree Empire remnants? I also heard that the Kree Empire's leader, the Supreme Intelligence, is actually a super-artificial intelligence. Grand Inquisitor Peter Parker, visibly relaxed, asked casually towards Iron Man David as he maneuvered his power armor for mortals into a seat. Iron Man David, in the midst of calculating countless data, was slightly distracted. It rotated its metal head, and more blue light emanated from the depths of its eye sockets. That's right, my master's wolf incarnation confirmed this. Not long ago, he, relying on the immense power of the 5 Infinity Stones, single-handedly attacked the Kree Empire's homeworld, only to unexpectedly discover that the Kree's so-called leader was merely a very ancient abomination intelligence. Although I believe we should absorb everything from them for our own use, the Wolf Incarnation, in order to escape the repeated harassment and obstruction from the Kree Empire, directly used the Power Stone to destroy their homeworld, indirectly leading to the terrible situation we now face. No sooner had the words fallen. Perhaps Grand Inquisitor Peter Parker was overthinking it. He vaguely felt that the greatest human Federation speaker before him, Primarch Luo Shaw's right-hand man, Iron Man David, playfully dubbed the Iron-Faced Chancellor by many, seemed to show a hint of dissatisfaction with the Wolf Incarnation's actions. My Grand Inquisitor, you don't need to show that awkward expression. I am indeed dissatisfied with the Wolf Incarnation's series of actions. At the very least, the true My Master would not make such a rash move. Iron Man David, seemingly having finished his remote control, slowly crossed his hands in front of him. He said indifferently towards Peter Parker, I never opposed killing aliens, but one must also consider the developing situation in the depths of the universe. Do you know how much we have to pay to make those alien allied forces who have completely pledged allegiance to us understand that we and the Mad Titan Thanos are not of the same ilk? According to psychic divination, Thanos' slaughter and destruction are to reclaim the scattered power for the so-called creator gods and to fight against the chaos gods from the warp. Although our human empire is also at odds with the chaos gods, adding some difficulty to Thanos' actions is also a good thing. But the Wolf Incarnation's planet-destroying actions have needlessly created more enemies for our expedition fleet. Besides the completely shattered Kree Empire, another major power in the depths of the universe, the Sheer Empire, and their ruler, Gladiator, are becoming the joint leaders of more alien races, which has forced us to send out Primarch Fulgrim and the Second Expeditionary Force, composed of tens of thousands of giant Raven Guard, to form a long-term standoff with their defensive forces. But they were originally a powerful force we could have leveraged to fight against the Mad Titan. In my opinion, even annihilating aliens should wait until they have no more strategic value, shouldn't it? Moreover, the Wolf Incarnation's mission was clearly to find the whereabouts of the Soul Stone. Would a mere Kree Empire truly threaten a demigod holding 5 Infinity Stones? At this moment, Iron Man David, his eye sockets flashing with blue light, continuously complained to Grand Inquisitor Peter Parker. And Peter Parker's expression gradually changed from initial awkwardness to one of solemnity. Speaker David, facing such a huge change, do we not need to inform my Lord Primarch? Although the wolf incarnation is nominally part of the Primarch, his actions seem to be. Iron Man David, hearing Grand Inquisitor Peter Parker's words, pondered for a moment. He let out a slight sigh, shaking his head and saying, "Forget it, the issues we're facing just feel troublesome to deal with. The situation my master is facing in another universe may not be much better than here in the native universe, and it might even be worse." Just then, Iron Man David's words were not yet completely finished. On the countless virtual screens around them, communications from the astropathic choir continuously appeared in Iron Man David's field of vision. "Wait, these are direct orders from my master. We need to mobilize so many combat supplies in the entire Lamenter's great company. All mortal guards, except for the defensive forces, need to be on standby at all times. It seems a large-scale war, beyond our imagination, is about to break out. Thank you for your support." Chapter 990, Apocalypse, The Destruction of Baal, Part 1. Baal is the home world of the Blood Angels. From the current situation, it is just an ordinary planet in a star system located in the northern Ultima Segmentum, and it is a dry, barren, and dusty desert planet. However, in the more distant ancient times, Baal, along with its 2 moons, might have been a prosperous planet full of endless vitality. It was only with the widespread use of large-scale destructive viral weapons and nuclear weapons that countless highly radioactive fallout, chemical pollution, and deadly biological agents were scattered over every inch of the surface of Baal and its 2 moons. This left only the enduring mutants and increasingly violent wild animals. It was not until the angel named Sanguinius unexpectedly descended upon Baal Way 2 that countless struggling mutant tribes seemed to see a glimmer of hope they had never known before. Baal Way 2 is a moon enveloped by countless toxic oceans. Approximately 1/3 of each planetary year, cities formed by countless mutant tribes are plagued by a special natural phenomenon called red mist. This is a darkness that looks like blood, and everything outside the buildings is pitch black. The blood-red mist is also filled with terrifying levels of radiation and chemical pollution that even mutants cannot withstand. However, for the native mutants of Baal Way 2, this is one of the unchangeable aspects of their short lives. Thus, they learn to endure everything and how to struggle for survival in this harsh environment. When threads of red mist, filled with heavy metal particles and toxic substances, began to spread everywhere, every Baal native would lift the manholes hidden inside buildings. They would enter the labyrinthine underground passages to maintain the continuous flow of large quantities of living supplies. This is a custom of the Baal people, but it is also a survival wisdom hidden deep within the human gene. If the environment cannot be easily changed, then adapt to the environment until all difficulties are overcome. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, on the city streets filled with red mist, faint sounds of heavy footsteps could be heard. If any familiar Baal native chose to remain inside the ground-level buildings, they would know that these were the heavy footsteps only the Emperor's sacred offspring possessed. The next moment, a tall figure, muscular and robust, wearing blood-red power armor, slowly emerged as a blurred outline from the depths of the red mist. However, as the figure slowly advanced, one after another, similar robust figures rapidly appeared on the mist-shrouded city streets. Some Baal natives, wearing simple respirators over their mouths and noses, peeking out from building windows, instinctively gasped. The number of angels before their eyes reached several hundred. Even if these sacred offspring of the Emperor had an ancient tradition of worshipping my Lord Sanguinius, the number and timing of their arrival seemed overly dense. However, just as many Baal natives felt increasingly uneasy, this Astartes force of several hundred had already passed through parts of the city streets and entered a main street called Sanguinius Avenue. And at the end of this slightly winding street, surrounded by countless small buildings, an incredibly massive archangel statue was extending its arms and wings towards the blood-red sky to the east. Although most of the statue was firmly obscured by the spreading red mist, even the visible fragments were enough to convey the grandeur and magnificence of the entire statue. And those Astartes of unknown origin began a more devout procession towards the angel statue. The great remains of their gene father, the Archangel Sanguinius, were stored in the underground facilities there. But contrary to the truth secretly speculated by countless Baal natives, they were not here for worship or reverence this time, they were here only for sacrifice. Baal Prime, Archangel Fort. Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels, the great commander, walked in his golden power armor on the incredibly wide Archangel wall. This tall wall, which almost encircled the entire Blood Angels Fortress monastery, was being thickened and widened by countless automated engineering machines and the warband's blood thralls. Behind him, an incredibly thick diamond-armored dome, reflecting countless starlight, was slowly covering the top of the fortress monastery to cope with the impending war threat. Archangel Fort is located on a lonely twin-peaked megalith standing in the endless desert. The primal energy of volcanoes shaped it in ancient times, and the Blood Angels transformed it into a more habitable place. As far as the eye could see, countless tower buildings designed as angel faces or screaming aquilas, giant turrets, and battle fortresses gradually extended onto the surrounding ground. An unquantifiable number of laser arrays, large cannons, missile launchers, and giant guns powerful enough to shoot down a transport ship were hidden in every location, as if these things had completely replaced the natural fury from the depths of the boiling volcano, injecting another kind of artificial, endless fury. Dante, walking, slightly shifted his gaze. He gazed at the defensive fortifications named Ascent Fortress and the layers of thick inner walls gradually extending outwards. And within these inner walls, inside the countless stairwells called shafts, a rare touch of green was hidden. These were the extraordinary farmlands where the Blood Angels cultivated special crops, and a dilapidated park specifically preserving part of the satellite ecosystem. Ba-Wei I and Ba-Wei II were indeed two moons completely enveloped by toxic substances, with almost no other products besides pollution and minerals. But Baal Prime would always be a desert planet, and desert planets would still have many remaining ecosystems. Rumble. The roar of engines from shuttlecraft immediately caught Dante's attention. He instinctively looked up at the clear sky of Baal Prime, which seemed to be perpetually cloudless. Besides the faint trails left by the shuttlecraft, there were also the huge circular outlines of Ba-Wei I and Ba-Wei II in the background. A main fleet consisting of dozens of battle barges was slowly arranging itself into a defensive formation. More massive fleets from the Blood Angels' successor warbands were crossing the mottled deserts and toxic oceans of Ba-Wei II, while the even uglier volcanic craters of Ba-Wei I reflected the dense, massive figures of auxiliary vessels. Thank you all for your support. Unknowingly, it's already over 1,000 chapters and 2.2 million words. We're basically in the late stages of this book now, so if you could help me find any loose ends that need to be tied up, I'd appreciate it. My own statistics might have oversights, and I've forgotten some plot points long ago. I'll try my best to make the whole story come to a reasonable and complete conclusion. Buzz buzz buzz. Countless automated engineering machines were rapidly devouring the vast desert surrounding Archangel Fort. Numerous dilapidated buildings hidden beneath the sand were exposed to the scorching air, then rebuilt into defensive fortresses or watchtowers. Further out, the large landing zone was densely packed with Astartes and various transport ships. Such a busy and lively special scene made Dante momentarily feel the bloodline memories from the Great Crusade era. Dante himself could be said to be the commander who had led countless Astartes in combat for the longest time among the entire Blood Angels, their successor chapters, and even more Astartes battle groups. Because in the current human empire, there were no Astartes older than him. Perhaps similar ancient elders still existed deep within the warp or in some forgotten fringe worlds of the empire. But in the official records of the human empire alone, Dante was the only important individual. At this moment, Dante, whose gaze was fixed on countless warband serfs transporting various ammunition and supplies, seemed to subconsciously take a deep breath. The arrival and support of countless battle brothers and successor chapters did not alleviate the heaviness in his heart much. He had known for a long time that the main fleet of the Leviathan was coming. The struggle and efforts of the Blood Angels in the Hades system were their last chance to buy time. However, if it weren't for the unexpected intervention of the Space Necron's overlord, the Traveler, Dante himself might have died in the Hades system. As a result, Dante had no choice but to return to Baal Prime to prepare for war. He chose to summon all the separated angelic successors. Countless successor chapters who inherited Sanguinius's bloodline arrived here one after another, fighting desperately to resist and even destroy the enormous tendrils of the hive mind. Currently, the number of Astartes on Baal Prime had reached several thousand. In this day and age, it was already very rare to see such a large number of Astartes gathered together. Blood angels, flesh tearers, blood angels, crimson angels, blood drinkers, blood swords, crimson blades, flesh tearers, blood knights, tomb keepers, angels sanguine, golden sons, flesh tearers warband, etc. Almost all of Sanguinius's successors responded to Dante's call. And what moved Dante the most, besides the flesh tearers warband who were the first to arrive on Baal Prime, was the flesh tearers warband. It was the flesh tearers warband, which had already been declared excommunicate traitorous by the Inquisition. After these loyal Astartes, bearing the name of traitors, met privately with Dante, they chose to maintain a certain distance from the other warbands. Aside from repeatedly receiving combat supplies transported by the warband serfs, they seemed to have made no demands of Dante or the Blood Angels. At this moment, Dante, who once again let out a sigh, shook his head slightly. He might not be able to change the decision of the Inquisition, but he could ensure that the Flesh Tearers warband received more support from Sanguinius's successors. However, just as Dante was about to raise his hand to call a few warband serfs to relay some secret messages to the numerous warbands, a low voice from the communication channel immediately made Dante collect all his thoughts and focus completely on the matter at hand. "My lord Dante, we have a situation. Tens of seconds ago, a large amount of warp fluctuations were unexpectedly detected at the edge of the Baal system. We are temporarily unable to analyze the cause of this phenomenon. Does this mean the main fleet of the Tyrannid tendrils has arrived here early? Damn bugs, the defensive positions on Baal Wei and Baal Secundus haven't been fully completed yet." Dante, hearing the Blood Angel's report, pondered for a moment. He immediately gave an important reply to the communication channel. "Battle brothers, don't panic. Based on our understanding of the Tyrannid, their invasion signs are too obvious. Firstly, a large number of Psychers and Librarian brothers would definitely produce various abnormal phenomena. If there are none now, it means the warp fluctuations are unrelated to the Tyrannid. In the name of Commander Dante, I immediately order the joint fleet from various successor chapters above Baal Prime to prepare for any enemy. If the newcomers do not respond, then strike first." Subsequently, Dante's order was quickly sent out by the Blood Angels on the other end of the communication channel. However, before the joint fleet from various successor chapters had advanced much, a long-suppressed excited voice once again came through Dante's communication channel. "My lord Dante, we have successfully made contact with the other party. It's the Calamity Legion. It's my lord Luo Shah, from the ancient legends. Also known as the Dark Side Regent of the current empire. A true Primarch my lord is leading his legion fleet to support us Blood Angels." As soon as the other party finished speaking, Dante, whose expression on his aged face had been tense, couldn't help but take a deep breath. A fleeting faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Father, are you protecting us again in the unseen?" Between the cold void, countless dense, massive metal warships continued to navigate the void lanes. And the most striking presence within the entire Typhoon fleet was naturally the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, which was over 20 kilometers long. As well as the Super War Fortress Hero Tower, which possessed planetary destruction capabilities by itself. When the Typhoon fleet gradually arrived in the cold void near the Baal planet, a large number of main fleets began to join the joint fleet composed of countless successor chapters. And with the Gloriana-class battleship and the Hero Tower as their centers, they quickly constructed layer upon layer of defensive formations. Subsequently, countless large transport ships capable of directly entering the atmosphere and thousands of Thunderhawk transports also began a faster deployment of the Astartes within the Calamity Legion towards the surface of Bal Prime. And Primarch Luo Sha himself, as well as the company commanders of each Legion company, also boarded the first wave of Thunderhawk transport formations. They headed towards the Blood Angels Fortress Monastery, above Axe Angel Fort. Soon after, when Luo Sha, wearing vibranium power armor on his massive body, had just stepped out of the cabin, in front of the large landing zone, Astartes of varying heights and builds, wearing various models and colors of power armor on their muscular bodies, knelt swiftly on one knee towards the Primarch without any hesitation, and bowed their heads completely. Chapter Master Dante of the Blood Angels. Chapter Master Seth of the Flesh Tears. Chapter Master Dark of the Angels Sanguine. Chapter Master Cliff of the Golden Suns. Company Commander Baris of the Blood Angels. Crimson Angel. Blood Drinkers. Blood Knights. Flesh Tearers. We greet the Gene Seed Primarch, my Lord Dark Side Regent. Thank you for your support. At this moment, the arrival of Primarch Luo Sha, Lord of Calamity, undoubtedly injected a powerful boost into the numerous Astartes. As a legendary Primarch and Dark Side Regent, he naturally became the most powerful being on Bal Prime and its moons, second only to Dante and others. However, Luo Sha did not arbitrarily interfere with others' command authority. Dante remained the overall commander of the entire battlefield. After the chapter masters or company captains from various sons of Sanguinius had completed their audience, Luo Sha, with his massive physique standing on the thick walls of Axe Angel Fort, began to listen to Dante's detailed arrangements for the entire battlefield. So far, 27 warbands had responded to Dante's call. Among them were even some sons of Sanguinius that the Blood Angels' chief librarians could not find records of. According to Dante's estimation, when all known and unknown sons of Sanguinius had arrived in the Bal system, they would have approximately 20,000 Astartes fighting to defend Bal, and every son of Sanguinius arriving here was a crucial cornerstone in resisting the Leviathan. Additionally, the Blood Angels warband temporarily set aside their centuries-old new recruit tradition. Numerous Thunderhawk gunships were searching the two moons of Bal for all willing individuals to form a large mortal defense force to enhance their strength. All excess weapons and food were being distributed to the mutant tribes that could be found. Based on the deep friendship between the two sides over countless years, the Blood Angels said nothing more, and the mutants within the tribes asked nothing more. In the long time to come, no matter how much effort the mutants of the tribes made, or how many monsters they killed, any act of survival would reduce the immense pressure on the Blood Angels and other warbands from the front lines. At this moment, Luo Sha, hearing Dante's series of words, seemed to shake his head slightly. He did not propose using a portion of auxiliary ships to transfer all mutant tribes on the Bal moons. This was a terrifying war concerning the life and death of all Bal, requiring every Bal native to contribute their precious strength. Subsequently, Luo Sha, whose thoughts were rapidly turning, immediately ordered the entire Calamity Legion to launch a larger-scale troop deployment operation onto Bal's surface. And under the silent gaze of the overall commander Dante and others, as well as a large number of sons of Sanguinius Astartes. Large transport ships, in conjunction with possibly tens of thousands of Thunderhawk transports, gradually obscured the entire sky of Bal. The vanguard force that arrived first was naturally a son of Sanguinius, the Lamenter's Company, which Luo Sha had directly teleported from native Terra. The Lamenter's Company, now numbering around 35,000, was almost entirely deployed. Wearing new black and white Terminator power armor, they had just stepped onto Bal's desert surface and immediately earned the admiration and envy of countless sons of Sanguinius Astartes. This was because the production system of the native universe was overly prosperous, allowing Luo Sha's all-Terminator plan to be successfully realized. It also allowed every Lamenter to wear Terminator power armor with astonishing defensive capabilities, and those Lamenter veterans of company captain rank even replaced their outer shells with pale gold vibranium, becoming indestructible little golden figures. Following closely behind the Lamenter's company was the incredibly formidable Shark Eater Company. They currently deployed approximately 20,000 Astartes to Ball Prime. These Shark Eaters, who were almost Luo Sha's direct sons, were top tier in both equipment and combat awareness, but also one of the Astartes companies with the highest casualties on various battlefields. As time slowly progressed, the large transport ships and countless Thunderhawk transports, coming and going, seemed to never pause for a moment. Within a 100-kilometer radius of Archangel Fort on the dry surface, dense formations of Astartes and heavy vehicles from the Calamity Legion were spread out. The Blood Raven Company, whose total strength had just reached nearly 10,000, led by Company Captain Gabriel, was discussing with the Blood Angels chief librarian Mephiston how to arrange their defensive positions. Within the Silver Skull Great Company, numbering only 5,000, countless librarian brothers, kneeling on one knee, were performing continuous psychic divinations in the shadows of numerous heavy vehicles, hoping to receive revelations from the Emperor and foresee battlefield intelligence in the near future. The Alpha Company, which had recently joined the Calamity Legion and numbered only about 1,500, had already dispersed via Thunderhawk transports to Ball Prime and its 2 moons. They would utilize their expertise in infiltration and counter-infiltration to prevent Tyranid lictors from carrying out stealthy infiltration. The Solemn Iron Fathers Cardin and Titus, respectively leading 500 Iron Hands and 3,000 Ultramarines, were assisting in making Archangel Fort's defensive positions more robust and reliable. Unfortunately, the Space Wolves Great Company and Ragnar the Young Wolf had gone with Sai-Fu Luo Sha to support Lionel Johnson. Otherwise, they would undoubtedly have been eager to join this large-scale war against the Tyranid. Currently, on the desert surface of Ball, the number of Astartes from the Calamity Legion reached approximately 75,000. Once more sons of Sanguinius had fully arrived, the total number of Astartes might reach an astonishing 100,000. This might be the second time such a large number of Astartes had been gathered, after Luo Sha's expedition to the Calamity system. And just as the overall commander Dante and others were growing increasingly excited by the arrival of countless Astartes, all of Primarch Luo Sha's war mobilization was far from over. Boom boom boom. At the same time, the War Fortress Hero Tower, located deep within the Cold Void, began a rapid transformation of its physical structure under the protection of countless metal ships. Next, massive triangular cuboid metal modules slowly pierced the atmospheres of Ball Prime and its 2 moons, carrying streaks of frictional fire as they landed on the endless desert surface or the heavily bio-polluted blood-red land. Once these giant metal modules, each over 1,000 meters in height, rapidly opened, hundreds of thousands of smart control legions immediately began continuous defensive construction on every inch of the surrounding ground, and massive defensive facilities appeared at a visible speed in the somewhat bewildered gazes of numerous mutants. Aside from the Astartes, Primarch Luo Sha did not mobilize any mortal forces to join this large-scale campaign against the Tyranid Leviathan main tentacle. Even having the Imperial Guard and stormtroopers from native Terra prepare in advance was merely a precaution on his part, leaving himself some contingencies. Luo Sha's true core strength for confronting the Leviathan main tentacle was actually these unquantifiable smart control legions. Since the Tyranid always preferred to fight to sustain themselves, recycling countless Tyranid corpses for large-scale attrition tactics. Then Luo Sha also wanted them to personally experience the terrifying power of the Smart Control Legion. Thank you all for your support. Various defensive measures between Ball Prime and its satellites entered their final stage of preparation. Then, a fleet of unfamiliar capital ships, originating from the depths of the warp, led more of Sanguinius's descendants to successfully arrive at Ball's spaceport. The number of ships merely lingering in the cold warp reached an astonishing 2,000. Although approximately 2/3 of these ships belonged to Primarch Luo Sha's Calamity Legion fleet, and the number of auxiliary ships with weak combat power was quite substantial. However, the combined main fleet of the Blood Angels and their successor warbands was not to be underestimated either. And when the total number of Astartes officially exceeded 110,000, Inside the Archangel fort on Ball Prime, Dante, as the overall commander of the battlefield, was silently executing an order from Primarch Luo Sha. That was to preemptively transfer the precious remains of the Blood Angel's gene father, the Archangel Sanguinius. Additionally, all the gene seeds of the Blood Angels and their successor warbands would be transferred into several capital ships and kept as far away from Ball Prime as possible. Although Luo Sha knew that every descendant of Sanguinius was prepared to sacrifice themselves on the spot. However, as a Primarch and the Dark Side Regent, he also had to consider the situation from a higher dimension, contemplating the future of the Blood Angels and their various successor warbands. Facing the Primarch's request, among the 17 chapter masters of the successor warbands present, and many more company captains, only the notoriously exclusive Flesh-Tearers warband expressed that it was unnecessary. Almost every other successor warband, after careful consideration, decided to heed the Primarch's advice and transfer batches of incredibly precious gene seeds and various valuable ancient data into the designated ships. However, just as everyone was immersed in the solemn atmosphere of an all-or-nothing struggle. According to the latest intelligence received by Luo Sha and Dante, in a desert oasis on Ball Prime, the Sons of the Hydra from the Alpha Company unexpectedly engaged in a cat-and-mouse death game with several lictors who had hitched a ride on successor warband ships and infiltrated the planet's surface. These Tyranid vanguard units were not overly formidable in terms of combat power alone. A well-trained Astartes 5-man squad could easily deal with them. But the difficulty with lictors lay in the fact that even if they were killed on the spot, the pheromones they had successfully emitted would even cross the cold warp, continuously attracting the Tyranid fleet. Moreover, their appearance often signified one thing: the Tyranid had already discovered the exact location of their prey. Indeed, after several lictors were swiftly eliminated by the Sons of the Hydra, countless psychers in the astropathic choirs and many librarian brothers vaguely sensed the terrifying sign of warp fluctuations completely subsiding. The immense pressure from the hive mind caused the usually tumultuous warp to enter a state of death-like silence, utterly devoid of ripples. From this moment on, it also meant that the Ball system would be unable to transmit or receive any messages or support. At the same time, a dozen small reconnaissance fleets, dispatched ahead to the edges and beyond the Ball system, encountered unbearable, devastating blows. They had no choice but to intermittently transmit the apocalyptic scenes they witnessed back to Ball before each ship sank. Across countless void zones, measured in astronomical units, there were traces of the Leviathan's main fleet everywhere. If nothing unexpected happened, it was likely that, besides the Ball system, numerous surrounding systems had already fallen, completely becoming blood and sustenance within the Great Devourer's maw. They have arrived. At this moment, Luo Sha, wearing vibranium power armor on his massive body, cast his cold gaze over the chapter masters and company captains standing before him. His incredibly deep yet resolute voice quickly reached the ears of every Astartes. You are all battle-hardened veteran elites, so I don't need to say much more. In this battle, the Emperor is with you, Sanguinius is with you, and I am with you. Since it's almost time, let us begin. As soon as Luo Sha finished speaking, countless Astartes present forcefully struck their heavy Dao steel breastplates in the direction of their Primarch, my lord. The entire Archangel fortress hall erupted with dull sounds like thunder. For Sanguinius, for the Emperor, for Luo Sha, for the Calamity Legion, with countless battle cries rising and falling. The cerulean light of teleportation technology immediately transported some of the fleet commanders, who were more skilled in void warfare, back into their respective capital ships. Immediately following, the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, surrounded by countless capital ships, initiated the highest level of fire readiness towards the direction of the encroaching Leviathan's massive tendrils. Countless weapon arrays, gigantic turrets, and space torpedo launchers were poised, and more human pilots specializing in carrier-based aircraft had completed all flight preparations. Soon after, the first red dot, emitting a piercing warning sound, appeared on the green screens of numerous auger detection instruments. In less than a second, hundreds of red dots instantly increased to thousands. Until tens of thousands of dense red dots appeared on the bridge screens of countless capital ships, causing every human captain and fleet commander to instinctively gasp. Hum hum hum. Instantly, every capital ship from the Calamity Legion fleet and the Blood Angels joint fleet rapidly raised an incredibly thick void shield, covering the surface of their massive metal hull. The next moment, as the massive exhaust flames continuously spewed from numerous ship engines, leaving countless visual trails in the cold warp. The colossal Void Fleet, led by the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, surprisingly launched a preemptive strike, unleashing incredibly terrifying firepower upon the rapidly approaching Leviathan's massive tendrils. Boom! In an instant, beams of increasingly brilliant, terrifying lance strikes, like torrential rain, streaked across the extremely vast void distance. They instantly landed on the chitinous exoskeletons of numerous gigantic angler whale bug ships, violently tearing open hideous wounds capable of destroying all carbon-based matter within them. At the same time, spore torpedoes or acid projectiles from countless Tyranid living ships, at a terrifying speed far exceeding imagination, crossed vast stretches of the void, launching a carpet bombardment towards the front of the massive fleet's defensive formation. Tens of thousands of Tyranid banshees and many more bizarre, even unnameable, super-large bio-weapons immediately joined this white-hot void battle, to protect the more crucial angler whale bug ships so they could approach Baal Prime and its satellites. In fact, in countless wars against the Tyranid, large-scale naval battles were never the main course. The more brutal ground battles were the key to determining the final victor. Thank you all for your support. Between the cold void, countless colorful laser beams and spore projectiles were streaking across immense astronomical distances. A large-scale void battle, growing increasingly fierce, was rapidly unfolding. At this moment, numerous Cobra-class destroyers, though small in size but incredibly agile in navigation, immediately broke away from the Imperial defense formation. They launched dense barrages of space torpedoes towards the continuously advancing angler whale bug ships and numerous giant bio-weapons, attempting to slow their advance. However, before some of the closer angler whale bug ships could be completely sunk by the triggered space torpedoes, giant bio-weapons, resembling octopuses or squids, simply withstood the explosive damage with their extremely thick chitinous carapaces. The next moment, large tendril tentacles, comparable in size to planet orbital towers, coiled around the metal hulls of the destroyers, instantly tearing each ship into scattered pieces of metal wreckage. Boom! Just then, the Gloriana-class battleship, Iron Fist, from the Imperial Defense Formation had finished adjusting the firing units of its numerous giant macro cannons. In an instant, physical shells, each comparable in size to a small ship, were blasted deep into the angler whale bug ships like explosive flashes of lightning. Dozens of empty zones, each approximately tens of thousands of kilometers in diameter, immediately appeared among the Leviathan main tentacle's numerous vanguard fleets. Perhaps the Iron Fist's method of combat set a good example for other ships and fleet commanders. After a large number of carrier-based attack aircraft were successfully deployed to intercept the numerous giant bio-weapons approaching the Imperial Defense Formation, the macro cannons and nova cannons from the battle barges and cruisers immediately began continuous bombardment of the endless Leviathan main tentacle. At this moment, thousands of angler whale bug ships and numerous giant bio-weapons were torn into countless fragments of flesh and blood by physical shells streaking through the void, and the Hive fleet's overall numbers began to suffer visible, significant losses. However, this favorable situation for the Imperial side in the naval battle could not be maintained for long. One of the great difficulties of void warfare is that both sides are actually in a three-dimensional space, not a simple two-dimensional plane. When the hive mind keenly detected that the losses of angler whale bug ships and giant bio-weapons were too great, the opponent immediately detached several substantial hive fleets from the middle and rear of the Leviathan main tentacle, then covertly executed rapid flanking maneuvers from below and above the Imperial Defense Formation. Even though the Imperial fleet commanders immediately implemented corresponding countermeasures, ordering dozens of battle barges and cruisers that were reloading macro-cannon ammunition to immediately change their combat direction, the Leviathan main tentacle's sudden tactical flanking still created huge void gaps in the previously tight defense formation. Click, click, click. At this moment, an unnamed strike cruiser, the sole survivor of a Sons of Sanguinius, was firmly entangled by countless giant tendril tentacles. When the ship's bridge was crushed into countless metal fragments by the giant tendril tentacles, every fleet commander present understood profoundly that this Sons of Sanguinius, numbering only 100 or so, was finished. Perhaps these Astartes could contend with countless Tyrannid on the ground for a long time. But in void warfare, they might only survive for a moment. Boom. The next second, an incredibly bright planet-destroying beam suddenly streaked through the cold void, completely annihilating a hive fleet attempting to flank and ambush the rear of the defense formation. As the Leviathan main tentacle pushed forward with great force, the hero tower, originally only responsible for holding the line for the defense formation, had to lead a portion of the defense fleet to join the void battle. However, when the numerical ratio of Imperial ships to Hive fleet reached 1 to 100, almost every Imperial ship was forced into a situation of fighting independently. This also led to a large number of angler whale bug ships, carrying countless Tyrannid inside, successfully breaking through the defense formation and rapidly approaching the low orbit of Bal Prime and its 2 moons. And the first planet to bear the brunt was Bal Secundus. Deep within the incredibly thick red mist, incredibly thick metal city walls and concrete dams occasionally appeared and disappeared. And just on the outermost perimeter of the concrete dam, there was a wide trench that looked like a moat, with special substances flowing slowly inside, like living water sources. That was not extremely precious freshwater resources, but rather some ancient war weapon, or an indigenous alien species on Bal Secundus. This thing, called thirst water, possessed basic intelligence and even hunted. The entity, resembling fresh water, would wait for or lure thirsty creatures to drink, then seize the opportunity to drain all water from the prey's body, thereby gradually strengthening itself. However, the more indigenous blood angels understood thirst water better, they used all their strength to collect and control this unstudied special substance, turning it into a trap defense line against the Tyrannid. Boom, boom, boom. Just then, a large amount of metal wreckage from broken ships and the accompanying Tyrannid spore cyst appeared on the distant horizon. After countless dust and smoke permeated everywhere, knifeworm and gunworm, covered in decompression mucus, quickly stepped onto Bal Secundus's blood-red surface. They only stood bewildered for a moment before, led by a node organism, they launched a continuous, fierce charge towards the more distant fortress positions. Boom. And when the number of Tyrannid reached a certain limit, countless whirlwind missiles and heavy artillery fire immediately launched a saturation bombardment from deep within the fortress towards the depths of the Tyrannid. At the same time, crab-like machine guard wielding chainswords in their mechanical tentacles, and Fortress Star-type intelligent control machine soldier carrying Hellhammer laser cannons on their shoulders, under the cover of more gluttonous vulture-type flying machine soldiers, engaged in their first close contact with the Tyrannid before the Astartes combat teams. In an instant, countless Tyrannid flesh and limbs and Smart Control Legion mechanical parts flew everywhere. Every laser beam sweeping across the surface brought the overall advance speed of the Tyrannid to a complete halt. If this combat situation could be maintained, then perhaps the Smart Control Legion alone could stop the rampage of the Tyrannid. However, more Tyrannid spore cyst from the atmosphere constantly reminded the numerous Astartes behind the fortress bunkers that this incredibly brutal ground position battle had only just begun. Neither the newly arrived Tyrannid nor the long-prepared Imperial side had used their full strength. Thank you all for your support. Rumble. Inside and around Axe Angel Fort on Bal Prime, large cannons were roaring terrifyingly. Beams of terrifying light, surging from the ground, enveloped physical cannon shells, rapidly tearing the angler whale bug ships outside the atmosphere into burning, friction-scorched flesh and debris. However, even more Tyranid spore cysts successfully began their dense descent towards the desert surface of Ball Prime. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At the same time, Thunderhawk gunships, their engines emitting a low hum, repeatedly soared in formation across the sky. Countless laser cannons and heavy bolters constantly shredded a large number of Tyranid spore cysts that had not yet landed, striving to reduce the overall Tyranid population. Even so, an unquantifiable number of Tyranid gradually converged into a massive and terrifying Tyranid, launching a fierce charge towards Archangel Fort. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In mid-air, spore acid from within the Tyranid or terrifying beams fired from numerous defensive gun emplacements were either evaporated into thin air, or they were successfully diverted into the unknown depths of space by void shields that rippled slightly. However, at this moment, the loudest sound in the entire desert environment was not the roar of countless gunfire. The hissing and the friction of chitinous carapaces from the Tyranid seemed to suppress all other sounds. Even the violent wind constantly filling Luo Sha's ears seemed to carry the terrifying hisses and shrieks of the Tyranid. Within his emotionless field of vision, on the green virtual screens projected from the neck guard of the third-generation vibranium power armor, losses and achievements on each battlefield were being rapidly tabulated. From the unfortunate sinking of a meritorious battle barge or the complete annihilation of a small blood warband, to the accidental death of a civilian crew member or a crab-like machine guard that had just slain countless Tyranid but could no longer be recovered and rebuilt. At this moment, Luo Sha's entire brain seemed to be operating and calculating everything with immense frenzy. In his eyes, countless lives seemed to be merely a constantly decreasing numerical unit, a humanoid tool for the Primarch and Blood Angels to achieve ultimate victory. Dante, immediately order all Thunderhawk gunship formations to change their flight direction, return to Archangel Fortress to rearm and resupply. Tyranid aerial units, the Gargoyle, are gradually being released. I want the Thunderhawk gunship formations to stick to them closely. Don't let the Tyranid aerial units launch large-scale attacks on the ground battlefield. Luo Sha, his bronze face devoid of expression, commanded towards the Supreme Commander Dante without turning his head. The quick-thinking Dante immediately issued the Primarch's orders through a communication bead. Although the other party was nominally still the Supreme Commander of the entire battlefield. However, both sides, with immense tacit understanding, did not bring up the matter again. All orders being issued now came entirely from the Primarch alone. Immediately notify Tyberos and Seth of the Flesh-Tearers warband to lead a portion of the Astartes to conduct guerrilla decapitation tactics, and quickly find and eliminate all node organisms within this wave of Tyranid. Tell them to be fast. Order 1/3 of the heavy armored vehicle formations to temporarily leave Archangel Fortress. Tell them that when the Tyranid shows signs of confusion due to the loss of node organisms, they are to directly break up the main force of the Tyranid. At this very moment, as Luo Sha's orders were issued one by one, heavy vehicles driven by human warriors began to rapidly enter the scorching desert, awaiting further orders. Large numbers of fully armed Carcharodons and Flesh-Tearers Astartes also drove land speeders across the ground, launching flanking attacks deep into the countless Tyranid. Just a moment later, under the personal leadership of Tyberos and Seth, dozens of node organisms became fresh sacrifices for countless bolters and even thermo-melt bombs. Following this, countless heavy gun emplacements from within Archangel Fortress, as well as the overwhelming bombardment from even more heavy vehicles, inflicted heavy casualties on this wave of Tyranid, causing the number of countless Tyranid to visibly decrease. However, at this moment, more and more Tyranid spore cysts gathered across the entire sky of Ball Prime like pouring rain. Clearly, the hive mind also knew that Ball Prime was the most crucial location. Therefore, the other party directly mobilized even more angler whale bug ships, taking the immense risk of being forcibly sunk, to release a large number of Tyranid spore cysts. Puff, puff, puff. As time rapidly progressed, in the increasingly dim depths of the sky, Thunderhawk gunships, engaged in aerial dogfights with numerous gargoyle units, were successively subjected to terrifying surprise attacks from even more Tyranid sky fiends. These Tyranid units, far more skilled in aerial combat than even seasoned combat vehicle pilots, continuously performed nearly artistic aerial maneuvers and dive attacks, turning countless Thunderhawk gunships into casualties in the fierce battle above. As a result, even Luo Sha, who viewed countless human lives as mere consumption figures, had no choice but to order the remaining Thunderhawk gunship formations to immediately begin their withdrawal. He instead mobilized a greater number of Vulture-type flying machine soldiers, replacing the Thunderhawk gunship formations to become the Imperial side's sole remaining aerial resistance force. Boom, boom, boom. And with the trembling and humming of the desert surface, large numbers of roaring Tyranid, enduring the roar of countless artillery fire, had successfully reached the outermost defensive line of Archangel Fort. At this moment, large groups of crab-like machine guards and Fortress Star-type intelligent control machine soldiers, who had been wading deep in the sand for a long time, quickly engaged the Tyranid in a frenzied exchange of machinery and flesh. At the same time, countless Astartes from the Blood Angels and their successor chapters also set up heavy firepower weapons from the top of the towering, thick city walls, launching continuous barrages against the continuously surging Tyranid. Especially the most numerous Lamenters immediately stepped forward, driving their Terminator power armor. While providing vibranium energy shields for their battle brothers to prevent large-scale acid shells from deep within the Tyranid hive, they also raised the storm bolters in their palms, precisely targeting any Tyranid that appeared within their optical sights. Soon after, as the night over Baal Prime completely darkened, within everyone's field of vision, only the faint muzzle flashes from the void shields and the furious roars of countless heavy firepower weapons seemed to remain. And beneath the towering, thick city walls, countless mutilated corpses of Tyranid were piled up. Just then, heavy flamethrowers filled with promethium were heavily set down on the edge of the city walls by the newly rotated Astartes. Without any hesitation, they fiercely sprayed the warm flames of the Emperor and the Primarch onto the countless Tyranid that were climbing up, treading on corpses. Burn, you damned bugs! Thank you all for your support. When the first dawn arrived, the blood mist, stretching endlessly through the polluted air of Baal Secundus, seemed to turn a faint purple. It was the residue left after countless Tyranids' blood was completely evaporated by intense artillery fire, seemingly symbolizing the horror of this Tyranid invasion. Crackling. At this moment, Chief Librarian Mephiston, whose burly body was covered in a dark red robe, was carefully observing the shattered battlefield from the fortress wall, which was covered in flesh and arthropod limbs. He saw countless small Tyranid creatures, resembling maggots, writhing and tumbling across every inch of the ground, rapidly absorbing the fleshy remains of the Tyranid, not letting any biomass go unrecovered. The latest wave of Tyranid did not take the opportunity to launch an attack. This not only gave large numbers of Astartes and countless fortress turrets a brief period for maintenance and rest, but also provided the Smart Control Legion with time to recover metal parts and debris. In fact, if not for the existence of countless Smart Control Legion, Mephiston believed that since last night, the Astartes stationed on Baal Secundus should have engaged in close-quarters combat with the Tyranid. Thump, thump, thump. Just then, Gabriel, the company captain of the Blood Raven Company, arrived beside Mephiston, piloting an indestructible vibranium power armor. With a solemn expression, he looked at the Ripper, churning like a tide outside, and spoke to the Blood Angel's chief librarian. "My lord, the next will be the fifth wave of Tyranid. I anticipate that close-quarters combat will begin today. Although there is still a good amount of ammunition and supplies, we must prepare for a long battle and try to conserve ammunition consumption. Additionally, the energy consumption of the Smart Control Legion's large-scale remanufacturing module, currently guarded by all Blood Raven Company, has decreased by 5%. If the intensity of the Tyranid's attack remains at its previous state, then the Smart Control Legion's recycling and manufacturing procedures can last for a long time. However, you and I both know that this is impossible for the Tyranid. They will inevitably choose to change tactics and adjust the Tyranid units launching the attack." As soon as Gabriel finished speaking, Chief Librarian Mephiston, seemingly devoid of emotional fluctuations, slightly turned his head. His long white hair slowly fell onto his cold, blood-red Dao steel armor, and he spoke in a low voice. Next, let the Blood Knights brothers take the front line. Their entangled sanity won't last much longer. Also, tell Chapter Master Kong of the Crimson Blade Warband that even if they fight to the last man, they must ensure the Star Apothecary relay station on Bal Secundus remains absolutely secure. At this moment, Mephiston's words had just reached Gabriel's ears, and he had not yet nodded in reply. The countless Ripper within the two men's field of vision immediately wriggled rapidly back into the depths of the thick, increasingly purple blood mist. This seemed to be a concrete indication that the Tyrannid was about to launch a new, fierce assault. And as more Smart Control Legion rapidly deployed, their autonomous actions, reappearing on the shattered battlefield, also reminded the countless Astartes present that the relentless Tyrannid had once again returned. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Just then, Mephiston's originally emotionless brows furrowed slightly. His precognitive ability, inherited from Sanguinius, began to play a huge role amidst the boiling and surging psychic energy. Just a few seconds later, Mephiston's eyes widened considerably, as if he had witnessed something incredibly horrifying. He immediately commanded Gabriel, who was standing beside him, in a deep voice. Gabriel, temporarily hand over all command of the fortress front line to you. All blood angels, lamenters, and flesh tearers who are not currently on a mission, follow me immediately. A unit of Tyrannid burrowing pythons is secretly moving, and their target this time is beneath the war fortress. PFF'd. A vibranium power sword, carrying all the toxic substances in the polluted air, was deeply plunged into the enormous body of a chief warrior bug. As the blade churned back and forth, its disintegrating field had completely destroyed the creature's internal system. Boom! At this moment, Craig, the leader of the giant Raven Guard, moved his incredibly thick arm slightly. He threw the chief warrior bug, now devoid of any life, onto a pile of corpses nearby. Looking around, the broken city walls and massive trenches were already covered with the shattered flesh and blood of countless warrior bug, knife worm, and even gun worm. The Astartes corpses of the Howling Griffin's Terminator were also temporarily mixed and entangled with countless Tyrannid corpses. These incredibly loyal sons of Sanguinius, after personally slaying hundreds of times their own number of Tyrannid, had no choice but to offer their even more precious lives. Currently, the battlefield situation on Ba Wei was clearly much more severe than on Bal Secundus and Bal Prime. In terms of the constantly arriving numbers of Tyrannid, Ba Wei, located almost on the backside of Bal Prime, held a considerable geographical advantage. However, the death rate of Astartes was several times that of other battlefields. This was partly due to the large Smart Control Legion remanufacturing module on Ba Wei being unfortunately subjected to devastating destructive attacks during the second wave of Tyrannid. This led to the Smart Control Legion's most effective attrition tactics and numbers not being effectively replenished. When the battle became more intense, the gaps in the front line could only be filled with the lives of Astartes. On the other hand, it was also due to a situation that was bound to happen for the Lamenter's Great Company, which had more stationed personnel, because of their company customs and battlefield responsibilities. They would constantly go to rescue the mutant tribes who came to escape the Tyrannid, even if some sons of Sanguinius present were filled with incomprehension and resistance towards the Lamenter's actions. However, as each of the Howling Griffins successfully rescued wave after wave of mutant tribes at the cost of their precious lives, every sons of Sanguinius of the Blood Angels indeed had nothing more to say. Is it worth exchanging the life of an Astartes for the survival of one or even several mutants on an incredibly intense battlefield? Perhaps this same question has completely different answers within each sons of Sanguinius. But at least in the heart of every Astartes in the Lamenter's Great Company, the only answer to this question is that it is worth it. Because they are the Lamenters. They are the sons of Sanguinius, the descendants of the Archangel Sanguinius, the sons of Luo Sha, the Lord of Calamity, and one of the few consciences among countless Astartes battle group. Thank you for your support. Boom, boom, boom. Bal Prime, outside Axe Angel Fort's perimeter defenses, beyond the second defensive wall. A large number of Astartes from the Shark-Eater Great Company were wielding humming chainsword axes, launching a counter-charge against the almost boundless, terrifying Tyrannid swarm before them. It was now the third day since the Leviathan main tentacle invaded Ball Prime, and the first wall defense line had already fallen. In mid-air, countless fierce artillery fire and whirlwind missiles from the Axe Angel fort continuously covered the deeper parts of the Tyrannid swarm, attempting to blast open a path paved with flesh and blood for the stubbornly advancing Astartes. Soon after, some Carcharodons, whose injuries were too severe, were forced to activate their life-saving Belisarius furnace, resisting the tearing and dismemberment from countless Tyrannid while unhesitatingly activating the thermo-melt bombs they carried. As Luo Shah's progeny, they resolutely chose to turn into scattered black ashes in the air, along with all Tyrannid creatures within several hundred meters, at the last moment of their lives. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was at this moment, accompanied by the hum and tremor from the bloody air. A terrifying figure, with countless dark shadows entwined around its massive body, suddenly streaked across the sky. Luo Shah, who had just annihilated hundreds of thousands of Tyrannid gargoyles and Tyrannid fiends, crashed heavily into the midst of countless Tyrannid like a sudden humanoid meteor. The next moment, under his careful control, strands of dark shadow rapidly swept and entwined around every surrounding Tyrannid. In just a moment, a large number of Tyrannid, who couldn't react in time, were completely shredded into flying fragments of flesh and blood. And just as the invincible Luo Shah successfully attracted the attention of countless Tyrannid, the advancing Carcharodons also successfully reached their mission objective. They successfully recaptured the turret position of a large cannon from the encirclement of the Tyrannid swarm. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, a dozen executioners, known as Screamer Killers, shook their increasingly massive and burly bodies and quickly converged towards Luo Shah. Luo Shah, who could clearly perceive his surroundings with his keen psychic abilities, immediately discovered these highly threatening Tyrannid creatures. He stomped hard on the rigid ground, which was covered in broken Tyrannid flesh, with his magnetic boots, and his massive body, enveloped in dark shadow, instantly lifted off the ground and rose into the air. Immediately after, Luo Shah's large palm once again gathered countless dark shadows. He unhesitatingly unleashed the endless wrath of shadow power upon the executioners leaping high from the ground. Crackling. However, at this moment, the shadow power, which was usually effective against ordinary Tyrannid creatures, seemed to have temporarily lost its effect. A large amount of shadow power was completely blocked by an invisible psychic barrier that suddenly appeared on the executioners. Only one unlucky executioner among these dozen attackers, who was closer to Luo Shah, had its massive body torn apart on the spot because it truly couldn't withstand the continuous impacts of the shadow power. At this moment, Luo Shah, reacting incredibly quickly, immediately controlled his massive body to continue ascending for a distance. He narrowly dodged the scorching plasma slashes from the upper limbs of a large number of executioners. There are probably Tyrannid Norn queens in this area, and definitely more than one. 10 to 1, these guys are here specifically for me. At this moment, Luo Shah, whose thoughts were rapidly flowing, immediately rotated his skull helmet back and forth, and strands of dark shadow wriggled and boiled deep within his palm, as if they would be released the next second. But, just as he was about to quickly search for the Norn Queen's traces among the dense Tyrannid swarm on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Waves of terrifying psychic bombardment from all directions forced Luo Shah, who was suspended in midair, to immediately change his massive body's direction, and he once again soared to a higher position. The next second, around Luo Shah's original position, 8 Tyrannid Norn queens, with slightly elongated large heads and slender, snake-like bodies, silently revealed their nauseating and terrifying figures in midair. And Luo Shah was not wrong. These Tyrannid Norn queens were indeed powerful psychic creatures specifically bred and created by the hive mind to target him. Moreover, what Luo Shah could not know was that, although these 8 Tyrannid Norn queens looked like ordinary Norn queens, each one was actually a super Norn queen, a psyker, with psychic power reaching alpha level. And the reason they still maintained the appearance of Norn queens was a trap specifically set by the hive mind for Luo Sha. Even though the last time several Leviathan fleets personally controlled by the hive mind allowed the fleet commanded by Luo Sha to escape. But this time, the hive mind seemed determined to obtain Luo Sha's flesh and memories. Rumble. In a flash, even though Luo Sha's beast instincts were buzzing, and he knew that these Tyranid Norn queens in front of him looked suspicious, he still had to shoulder the immense responsibility of a Primarch on the battlefield and personally eliminate these highly threatening Tyranid creatures. Otherwise, once the Tyranid Norn queens launched a large-scale psychic attack on the bravely fighting Astartes, and there were no more Librarian brothers on the battlefield to launch psychic countermeasures, then the number of Astartes who would die in a single engagement would be a figure Luo Sha could not simply tolerate. For Sanguinius, Luo Sha subconsciously let out a deep roar that echoed across the entire battlefield. His massive body seemed to fully unleash all its shadow power, and countless dark shadows spread tens of kilometers into the air. Immediately after, Luo Sha instantly transformed into his warp essence liberation state, with a raven's head and a human body. He unhesitatingly plunged downwards, enveloped in incredibly terrifying psychic fluctuations, towards the 8 alpha-level Tyranid Norn queens. At this moment, it was as if there were no spellcasting techniques between the two sides, only an incredibly pure and fierce confrontation of psychic power. In an instant, countless shadow powers belonging to Luo Sha rapidly condensed into a massive shadow palm that covered the sky, pressing down heavily from above onto the position of the 8 Tyranid Norn queens. And the 8 Tyranid Norn queens, who unleashed a large amount of psychic power from their heads, were completely unwilling to show weakness. A seemingly invisible but truly existing giant segmented limb violently collided with the massive shadow palm again and again, creating incredibly terrifying and intense impacts. The next second, countless Tyranid within 100 kilometers, as well as a large number of bravely fighting Astartes, were all swept away by the terrifying aftermath of the clash between the two sides. Rumble. Thank you for your support. When the terrifying psychic fluctuations and violent impact temporarily fell silent, in the mid-air where the psychic fluctuations had not yet dissipated, Luo Sha, with a raven's head and a human body, flew backward like a human cannonball launched with acceleration, heading deeper into the fierce battlefield. Countless clawing Tyranid quickly swept past below his massive body. Strands of dark shadow power, dancing back and forth, would occasionally reach some Tyranid creatures attempting to launch jumping attacks. Rumble. With a massive roar that echoed throughout the battlefield, Luo Sha's massive body heavily crashed onto the dry sandy ground covered by countless Tyranid. The terrifying kinetic energy, still not stopping, plowed a bloody trench several kilometers long deep within the main Tyranid force. PFF'd. The moment his massive body rolled and landed, even the incredibly powerful Luo Sha couldn't help but spurt a large mouthful of pale golden blood from his mouth and nose inside his skull helmet. Even his entire raven-headed, human-bodied warp liberation state almost completely dissipated. He had to forcefully calm his mind, despite the pain in his body, to successfully maintain it. For Luo Sha to face 8 alpha-level Super Norn queens with his shadow power alone. Even if Magnus, who was more proficient in all psychic sorcery, were to swap places with him, it would be of no use. Buzz buzz buzz. At this moment, Luo Sha, who had already keenly sensed more Tyranid rapidly closing in, took a deep breath. He immediately activated the Vibranium Power Armor's medical life support system, and his massive body struggled to rise from the depths of the sand, kneeling. The next second, Luo Sha's 2 thick arms, covered in strands of dark shadow power, shook slightly outwards. The 10 metal 10 rings, which he had not used for a long time, immediately buzzed. Then, they swiftly unleashed a continuous metallic spiral storm towards the large number of Tyranid surging in from all directions. And when Luo Sha's internal injuries, in his raven-headed, human-bodied form, were mostly healed by the panacea, and his massive body, driving the Vibranium Power Armor, stood up, his ocular view immediately showed him in the mid-air not far away. 6 Super Norn queens rapidly rushing over. and Thunderhawk gunships constantly adjusting their attack directions, attempting to buy time for the Primarch's recovery with their suicidal actions. Damn bugs, the full burst of shadow power only took down 2 Norn queens. At this moment, Luo Sha, his thoughts rapidly turning, seemed to have temporarily forgotten his chaotic battlefield environment. He entered a more tranquil and peaceful flow state, and countless combat strategies rapidly emerged. If he couldn't completely destroy these tyrannid psychic creatures with shadow power alone, then he would need to temporarily change his combat strategy and method. The blood power from Sanguinius could indeed sustain the fight. However, because it would cause Luo Sha to enter a special state of losing his sanity. Unless he stood on the brink of some terrifying life or death situation, he would not so easily use uncontrollable power. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In an instant, Luo Sha's raven-headed, human-bodied warp liberation state rapidly dissipated. Almost all the dark shadow power completely returned to his body, accelerating the recovery speed of his shadow power. Immediately after, Luo Sha's 2 thick arms fiercely grabbed at the bloody air around him. Besides the green glowing blood scythe and the dark, heavy Dawnbreaker Warhammer appearing in his palms respectively. One of the precious relics belonging to the Fire Dragon Lord. Vulcan's forge hand was also firmly gripped by a vibranium servo arms shaped like an octopus tentacle. And at the tips of the other 3 vibranium servo arms, multi-barreled Melta destroyers and Gauss cannons from the space Necrons were autonomously loaded. In just a few tens of seconds, Luo Sha's massive body completely transformed into a human-shaped mobile firepower fortress. A fully autonomous vibranium servo arms constantly manipulated the forge hand, spraying out countless blazing flames, melting the tyrannid attempting to approach. Sizzle sizzle sizzle. It was at this moment that the terrifying psychic fluctuations from the 6 Super Norn Queens once again swept madly towards Luo Sha's position. The even faster reacting Luo Sha, without any hesitation, activated the vibranium power armor's flight propulsion system and shot up from the ground. His entire massive body completely broke free from the encirclement of countless flames and the tyrannid. The next second, beams of incredibly brilliant green glowing Gauss cannon light and Melta destroyer beams, whose intense heat alone was enough to threaten the enemy, enveloped the Super Norn Queen's location like a sudden storm. Since you tyrannid have mastered psychic abilities, then come and taste the material science of the space Necrons and the human empire. Looking out, the entire sky of Ba Wei I seemed to have completely turned blood red. Even though the entire planet's surface was covered with clawing tyrannid, they still couldn't easily breach the dilapidated fortress, which already appeared on the verge of collapse. And outside the dilapidated fortress, where the large void shield flickered slightly, almost every inch of damaged city wall and every defensive fortification, after the Imperial side paid a heavy price, ultimately fell completely into the hands of the tyrannid. Of the tens of thousands of Astartes from the Lamenter's Great Company, Ultramarines' Great Company, and the Blood Angels and their successor chapters, now less than 3,000 remain. Before this, they had successfully repelled over 100 waves of terrifying tyrannid assaults in 8 days and 8 nights of continuous combat, slain 7 hive tyrants, and prevented the last remaining dilapidated fortress on Ba Wei from falling. Crack crack. Inside the dimly lit dilapidated fortress, besides the heavy firepower turrets surrounded by the shattered corpses of tyrannid, a small number of crab-like machine guards were waving their mechanical tentacles, assisting the equally tireless Ba Wei people in repairing the defensive fortifications. These mutant tribes, bought back by the Howling Griffins at the cost of their lives, did not betray the Astartes, trust in them. Tens of thousands of Ba Wei people, regardless of gender, age, or youth, all picked up weapons and tools. They did their best to help the Astartes handle all distracting miscellaneous tasks during brief lulls in combat, and they would assist the Astartes in fully defending this dilapidated fortress once the battle began. Thump thump thump. At this moment, a massive figure whose vibranium power armor shell was covered in fine scratches and even plasma melting marks was patrolling back and forth through every passage of the fortress, constantly meticulously checking the placement of each firepower turret and the progress of defensive fortification repairs. The person was Craig, the head of the giant Raven Guard, who was temporarily serving as a deputy officer. And the overall commander on Ba Wei at present was Captain Titus from the Ultramarines Great Company. Craig could now guarantee to anyone, in the name of the Primarch. That ordinary-looking, square-faced Ultramarines was probably the most powerful Astartes he had ever seen in his life, besides the Primarch himself. Even Tiberos, the Red Scar, the champion of their Calamity Legion, who was known as the first person below the Primarch within the Legion, might not easily surpass him. In Craig's opinion, it was only because Titus wouldn't deliberately seek closeness with the Primarch. Otherwise, with his combat ability, he should have long become a super favorite by the Primarch's side. Thank you for your support. Chapter 999, Apocalypse, The Destruction of Baal, Part 10. Thump. Just then, Craig, who was driving his vibranium power armor deeper into the ruined fortress for a pre-battle inspection, vaguely sensed that something was amiss. This primal tremor made him instinctively halt his magnetic boots. He not only drew a vibranium power sword, stained with tyrannid purple blood, from his waist but also raised a deep blue vibranium energy shield to cover most of his burly body. The area in front of Craig was supposed to be a defensive position for several Ultramarines squads and a Sons of Sanguinius chapter according to the layout. However, at present, he saw no trace of any Astartes here. This massive force, numbering at least 100, had vanished as if into thin air. Only half-serviced gun turrets and numerous heavy weaponry were left behind. Captain Titus, this is Craig. Lower C section of the fortress, I suspect lictors have infiltrated. Please immediately lead the Battle Brothers to reinforce the Void Shield reactor array. I believe the defensive strength there, with only 4 giant Raven Guards, is insufficient. Craig, reacting with incredible speed, immediately sent out a communication. In fact, in countless difficult battles before, similar situations had occurred. When everyone had held out until the 4th night, several lictors, skilled in stealth assassination, successfully infiltrated the ruined castle through an underground tunnel dug by a burrowing beast. Their only objective was not to assassinate a commander, but to attempt to destroy the power supply of the large void shield. It should be known that the only reason the ruined fortress on Ba Wei had not fallen was due to the immense casualties suffered by the Astartes present, and their continued reliance on the long-term existence of the large void shield. If the only void shield completely lost its defensive capability, then the ruined fortress would likely have no other option but to fall. And the large number of Astartes and mutant tribes would only become biomass for the Tyrannid. Fortunately, at that time, the Sons of the Hydra from the Alpha Legion were still present. Being more adept at counter-stealth tactics, they successfully tracked the lictors and re-destroyed the underground tunnels deep within the fortress. However, now, the Sons of the Hydra, specifically targeted by the Tyrannid, had successively fallen in subsequent defensive lines. Even if Craig and the others wanted to resolve the crisis quickly, they no longer had Astartes who could find the lictors' traces in a short amount of time. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, Craig, being extremely cautious, slowly drove his vibranium power armor deeper into the fortress passage. All the detection systems within his helmet's eyepiece had been rapidly activated. In just a few seconds, he successfully located piles of uniform magnetic boots footprints through heat detection. But when Craig arrived at the location where the countless magnetic boots footprints disappeared, he saw it at a glance in the corner of the wall. A large section of completely shattered thick wall and a dark, cavernous passage that seemed to lead deeper underground into the fortress. Could this be the work of a burrowing beast again? But why didn't the Sons of Sanguinius, specifically responsible for countering underground sneak attacks, issue any warning? And how could 100 Astartes not be able to deal with just a few lictors? I feel like something isn't right, but I don't know what it is yet. Craig thought to himself, his breathing becoming increasingly steady and prolonged. Even though his battle brother's instincts as a giant raven guard were constantly issuing some kind of warning, he didn't hesitate for long before driving his vibranium power armor down into the dark cavern. Thump, thump, thump. The next moment, the heavy footsteps from the magnetic boots gradually faded into the dark cavern and from Craig's ears. As a blood descendant of Corvus Corax, the silent stealth technique was an instinct almost ingrained in the massive body of a giant raven guard. And as Craig continued to delve deeper, the height and width of this dark cavern gradually increased. If before it could only barely accommodate one Astartes Terminator, then in the subsequent cavern passage, even driving a land raider would be more than enough. It was at this moment that Craig, silently demonstrating his stealth skills, suddenly halted all movement of his massive body. On one hand, his eyepiece range vaguely showed some Astartes heat signatures through the thick wall. On the other hand, he suddenly remembered what exactly felt wrong. Battle traces. 100 Astartes didn't leave any battle traces at the scene. Even if they were unexpectedly ambushed by lictors, it's impossible for there to be no signs of battle. This means either the Tyranid sent out some kind of super combat unit that can instantly kill any Astartes in secret, or this matter has nothing to do with the Tyranid. At this moment, Craig took a deep breath and carefully gazed at his eyepiece. He subconsciously sighed from within his helmet as he looked at the heat signatures that seemed to be in a kneeling posture. At present, I am more inclined to believe that other forces have intervened, such as chaos. Click, click, click. The next second, with a fleeting, subtle mechanical sound, the vibranium power armor enveloping Craig's massive body rapidly underwent a special transformation. He immediately activated his giant form, whose survival and combat capabilities were terrifying. Craig's entire burly body instantly enlarged several times, completely transforming into a gamma giant almost immune to physical attacks. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Immediately after, Craig, without any hesitation, unleashed his divine stealth skill, Shadow Step. His even larger giant body easily traversed the increasingly winding cavern passage. He arrived deep within a massive cavern where the air was permeated with specks of crimson light. At this moment, within Craig's field of vision, over 100 Astartes, kneeling on one knee, had been completely disemboweled by chainswords, losing all signs of life. A gaunt, incredibly pale mutant psyker, with a twisted, blood-soaked 8-pointed chaos symbol crudely carved into the center of his forehead, was slowly raising his distorted and ferocious face. Hey, you seem to be late, giant angel. I will return to the warm embrace of the gods, no longer enduring the painful torment from the Tyranid. The great blood god greets you. In a flash of lightning, the mutant psyker's low voice rapidly echoed around. Before Craig could even unleash his teleportation-like shadow step and launch a fierce cleaving attack, the opponent's entire frail body instantly exploded into countless crimson blood and fresh minced meat, and these things formed an incredibly massive blood-red teleportation gate before they even hit the ground. Rumble. The next second, with a massive blood-red pillar of light soaring from deep within the ruined fortress, a super warp storm, spanning thousands of kilometers, suddenly appeared in the blood-red sky of Ba-Wei-I. And the painful screams from the hive mind itself rapidly echoed throughout the entire Ball system through the countless mouths of the Tyranid. Thank you all for your support. The great author Chi Yu Shin Fan from the History Channel passed away due to illness. It's a pity, I had always added his books to my bookshelf but never got around to reading them. At this moment, whether on the two Ball satellites or the chaotic battlefield of Ball Prime, countless Tyranid, emitting terrifying shrieks from their oral cavities, completely lost their most basic control. Even the vast majority of the Tyranid, which were launching a fierce assault on Archangel Fort's defensive positions, regardless of their size, fell to the ground and died. Rumble. At this moment, with waves of increasingly chaotic psyker power surges, the Super Norn Queens, who were originally engaged in an aerial battle with Luo Sha, who had transformed into a humanoid firepower fortress, were instantly blasted into countless fragments of flesh and blood by the psyker shockwave from the warp, completely disappearing from the skies above the battlefield. In an instant, Luo Sha, who reacted incredibly quickly, immediately ceased his continuous terrifying bombardment. He forcefully controlled his vibranium power armor, which was extremely agile in flight, to hover in midair. After Luo Sha's cold gaze swept across the battlefield, where the life signs of the Tyrannid had largely disappeared, he looked up without any hesitation towards Ba Wei, from which large-scale psyker fluctuations were continuously emanating. A warp storm of this magnitude. That is, a special phenomenon that only appears when a large-scale warp gate emerges. Moreover, I vaguely sensed the bloodline pulsation of a traitor Primarch. Could it be Angron has arrived? At this moment, Luo Sha, whose thoughts were rapidly turning, only pondered for a moment. He immediately controlled his vibranium power armor, which had several heavy firepower weapons mounted on its power backpack, and flew towards Archangel Fort. Boom! A few minutes later, Luo Sha's massive body had just landed, and his magnetic boots, embedded deep in the ground, splattered a large amount of gravel and dust. Immediately after, Dante, wearing golden power armor on his robust body, arrived in front of Luo Sha with an extremely hurried expression. He said to Luo Sha, who had opened his skull helmet, with a very serious expression, "My Lord Primarch, a large number of mortal psychers and librarian brothers from various warbands have unexpectedly suffered a violent impact from the warp, but at the same time, they have also confirmed one thing, and that is Ba Wei has already been subjected to a chaos incursion from the Khorne Demonkin. According to some intelligence information we currently have, the chief librarian of the Silver Skull Great Company has foretold an even more tragic and terrifying war through psyker divination, but the fragmented information he received indicates that the enemy is not the Tyrannid. Chief Librarian Mephiston of the Blood Angels also seized this excellent opportunity when the warp experienced violent fluctuations. He used his precognitive abilities inherited from my Lord Sanguinius and vaguely saw some unspeakable future scenes, but the only thing he could tell us is to quickly withdraw the remaining forces on the Ball satellites. On one hand, this is for the final decisive battle with the Tyrannid, and on the other hand, I speculate it is to deal with the ensuing chaos incursion." At this moment, Dante's low voice seemed to contain a deep-seated weariness and despair. Originally, Dante thought their only home, the Ball system, was about to suffer a catastrophic disaster. However, countless sons of Sanguinius from the Sons of Sanguinius responded to the call and rushed to provide support, and a legendary My Lord Primarch and his incredibly powerful Calamity Legion also successfully arrived here. Yet, just as Dante believed that the Blood Angels could successfully protect the entire Ball system with the selfless help of countless Astartes, the current situation indicates that a chaos incursion from the Khorne Demonkin seems completely unavoidable. Thus, even from Luo Sha's perspective, he could somewhat understand the emotional fluctuations deep within Dante's heart. Bang! At this moment, one of Luo Sha's vibranium hands suddenly slapped Dante's thick shoulder pad heavily, emitting an extremely dull thud. He slowly took a deep breath, his gaze, devoid of any fluctuation, fixed on the other's aged face, and said faintly, "Dante, you are a son of Sanguinius, and the oldest Astartes. In terms of combat power, you are not as good as me, a Gene Seed Primarch, but in terms of combat experience and battlefield insight, I should be inferior to you. Therefore, you can tell me all your difficulties, but you must never show any weakness in front of other battle brothers. You are another humanoid monument besides me, your Primarch, and countless sons of Sanguinius will be proud of you. Moreover, I will tell you truthfully, my Calamity Legion still has more trump cards, it's just that the side effects of some special methods are too great, and I am unwilling to use them lightly. Trust me, no matter what kind of enemy and war situation we face next, I will fight alongside you Blood Angels until the very last moment." At this moment, Luo Sha's low words instantly dispelled the vast amount of despair and weariness that had been entwined deep within Dante's heart. The other person's entire combat aura and will seem to have returned to his robust body. Even that wrinkled, aged face seemed to have completely rejuvenated. "My Lord Luo Sha, all Astartes of the Blood Angels swear to fight to the death and will not retreat. We will pay any price to protect our home world. Dante said to Luo Sha in front of him, his voice firm and powerful. And Luo Sha, who slightly shook his head, once again took a deep breath. His gaze fixed on Dante, who was close at hand, and he said, "Since your combat morale has returned, then I don't need to comfort you, old soldier. Dante, immediately find a way to notify all Astartes on Ba Wei and Bal Secundus to return to Archangel Fort through the Calamity Legion's teleportation technology. We need to recoalesce a powerful force that even the Tyrannid will find difficult to devour, in order to cope with the battles that follow. Additionally, remember to contact the Typhoon Fleet, which is still entangled with the Leviathan Fleet, and have them immediately awaken all dreadnoughts within the great companies. This considerable number of ancient warriors will greatly assist our battlefield situation and provide more Astartes with time to rest. As for me, I will now individually contact Reditus the Sage within the Hero Tower. A batch of Gene-Eater weapons from the Dark Angels battle group, with lethality far exceeding that of virus bombs, will begin preparations for deployment. I believe these ancient weapons, infused with the Tyrannid genetic blueprint, will bring a huge surprise from the dark age of technology to the hive mind. And more importantly, I believe that before Angron personally leads his Khorne Demonkin into fierce battle with us, the Tyrannid will also give these Chaos Demon a small carbon-based biological shock. Thank you all for your support. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.